All right, we're doing poll watch. We're doing hog watch. We're doing it all. This was pretty funny, by the way. Classified leaks by detained Netanyahu aide may have undermined hostage operations. So just wanted to briefly dial in on this really quickly. Just deeply unserious people over there on the Israeli government side. So yeah, that we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, this is it. Election Eve is here. Bro, your blast off hasn't even reached 1K likes. Tell chat to like and retweet. It has. What are you talking about? It already is at 1K likes, and it will keep growing. Is he slandering me? I'm not. I'm just being fucking correct and truthful about your allegiances and how you have dropped us. You have dropped this community. You have dropped the ball. And that's fine. You know, you just don't like us anymore. So it is what it is. Kamala Harris secret vote ads.
Come on, boys. Let's make America great again. It's your turn, buddy.
Before you cast your vote in this election, think about how it'll impact the people you care about the most.
Daddy!
Remember, you can vote any way you want, and no one will ever know.
Do your patriotic duty.
You bet I did, brother.
What happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls.
My dad, a lifelong Republican, is voting for Kamala. That makes sense. MAGA World is preparing to undermine the election if Harris wins. We're going to be talking, yes, about Donny O'Sullivan's new reporting, obviously, because it's pretty fucking nutty, okay? Now, I am not going to say with 100% accuracy what I know will happen or whatever. I have maintained this position since the swap out happened. Like, if you want to know where I'm at, well, it's okay to break up with your boyfriend because he's voting for Trump. He's a rapist, and understandably, that's not going to sit right. Another take as bad as your music reviews. I love when Fantano pops off. My goat. Anyway, so here's the situation. Okay, for those of you who are wondering, like Hassan, let me catch you up. Because a lot of you haven't really been following closely. A lot of people are just tuning in because the election is tomorrow. And many people want to know what the fuck is up. Now, something that I've found out is that on my TikTok, the people are fucking crazy. I usually agree with you, but I think she's had a great campaign. She's had a great campaign. This is the TikTok we posted about my like broader analysis on my on what I think is happening with Kamala's campaign and what I think is going to happen come November 5th or maybe November 6th. So originally, this was a matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump pre-debate. I was saying, looking at 2022 performance, looking at the normal white theory, looking at vibes overall, I said that Joe Biden still had a likelihood of winning the election, albeit marginally. Then the debate happened, and everyone recognized that Joe Biden was an old, he was so old that his brain was fucking leaking out of his ear. And then, of course, once everyone else recognized the thing that we have known for years and years and years, then it became impossible. After that, my analysis was it's over. Then Trump got shot. On top of that, I was like, it's done. Even if Trump, especially if Trump hits the unity line, regardless, if he goes up against Joe Biden, he is going to win. And that was an absolute certainty. I gave you my lock. I said Donald Trump was going to win the election against Joe Biden. Okay. Then the RNC happened. Donald Trump did not go the unity route. Donald Trump chose JD Vance. That was a massive fucking flub, massive mistake for him. That was a base pick because he was still gearing up for running against Joe Biden, which he thought would be a cakewalk for a W. Okay? It would have been a cakewalk for him if he was going against Joe Biden, which now everyone was grossed out by, thought he was incredibly fucking old, and thought he was basically on the verge of death and was very frustrated about. They didn't like his policies either. They didn't like the economy, but they also thought, well, he's old. Like, he's clearly incapable of running this country. Then the unthinkable happened. The Democratic Party responded to public pressure. Public pressure and donor pressure aligned in this beautiful moment, and establishment Democrats actually swapped out Joseph Robinette Brandon for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris then picked Tim Walz. Kamala Harris, in that short period of time, basically went from a relatively lesser-known generic Democrat to the person that was running for president. There was no electoral process that took place, which some people were frustrated by, and I totally understand why they were upset by it. But Kamala Harris assumed that role, and in perhaps like a week-long period, Kamala Harris went from a lesser-known generic Democrat who was the vice president that people didn't really think about, people didn't know that well, to a person that had made up 10 points in the opposite direction and it caught back up to Donald Trump. It went from Joe Biden is definitely losing to Donald Trump to, oh my God, Kamala Harris has a pretty good chance of winning. Now, that paired up with the fact that high propensity voters were coming out and had come out already. Okay, had come out already for Kamala Harris, come out already for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, and the down ballot races outperforming Joe Biden at the time and even outperforming Kamala Harris at the time by like 6, sometimes 7 points in these key races in swing states made me understand that there is a lot of momentum and a lot of energy in the Democratic Party's direction. They just need a competent leadership. However, after the DNC kept repeating over and over again that the Kamala Harris campaign and the direction the Democratic Party was taking was basically running towards Joe Biden, who was seen as a old curmudgeon who was basically very unpopular, so unpopular that he had to do something unceremonious. He had to do something unique. He had to drop out of the race and, be swapped out for his vice president. All of that aside, Kamala Harris still had the fundamentals. Okay? She still did. I kept maintaining the position that if she builds upon the momentum and actually has a bold policy agenda, talking and communicating how she's going to be different than the existing administration, that she would have a tremendous time in the polls. She would have a much better standing in the polls, that people would be openly, defending her. Some of the issues was immigration. Another issue was on the economy front. I think that her policies were definitely, there was some good there, but there was a lot that was just lackluster. Okay, and the tacking to the center, tacking to the right, and the consistent hugging and kissing Republicans. Okay, all of that, in my opinion, was bad campaigning for the most part. Okay. But as I said, time and time again throughout this process, the liberals who would come at me and say, Hassan, what the fuck? You just don't want Kamala Harris to win because of Gaza, blah, blah, blah. I kept repeating, that's not the only issue I have with the campaign, although that is definitely an issue I have with the campaign, that she would still most likely win. Now, the last month or so was a little bit different because I think that Kamala Harris became more prominent in the last month, a lot more media opportunities. She put herself out there and she started pumping hundreds or tens of millions of dollars worth of ads with the campaign messages that they had aligned. And in that process, it seemingly backfired on the Harris camp, and instead, Republicans started gaining more momentum. Republicans started gaining momentum in down ballot races, but more importantly, Donald Trump started gaining momentum. I still, however, maintain the position until this day, and I still maintain this position that Kamala Harris will most likely win the election come tomorrow. And this is not just me looking at the polls, even though, of course, I have looked at the polls this entire time, but also looking at the vibes. I don't just do poll analysis, I do polls plus vibes. Why do I do this? Well, the reason why I do polls plus vibes is because polls alone are not going to be enough, okay? I have, however, learned something that's a little bit scary today, this morning. I've told you guys already, I have like a bunch of people that I talk to, normies in general. I have some high propensity voters, mid propensity voters, and low propensity voters in a place like California. And I look to who they vote for and how they vote as well, because I just want to kind of see a focus group basically. And my low propensity voter did vote for Donald Trump, which was shocking. And I don't know if it's because I basically kept asking him over and over again if he was going to go out and vote or not. But my low propensity conspiracy theory guy who loves RFK did actually end up voting. And that kind of shocked me a little bit. That kind of worried me a little bit because this is fucking California. It doesn't mean California's going to flip, obviously. Chat, this does not mean California's going to flip red. That's fucking idiotic. I'm not making that argument at all. But what it means is, even in a place where someone who is not likely to go out and vote at all, where his vote is not even going to fucking matter at all, he found time out of his day to go out and vote, even though he has never gone out and voted before. That to me is a little troublesome. I haven't really seen this anywhere else in the data, but that still scares me regardless. Okay? So, having said that, however, I think that the fundamentals are on Kamala Harris's side still. Okay? I think that I have no faith that low propensity voters won't vote for Trump is bizarre, but he is rallying the RFK supporters. Well, now that I've talked about the Kamala Harris side of things and what I consider to be like not great campaigning, for example, I think that she focused far too much on trying to win over the white suburban mothers, and you can win them over. No one is saying don't try to win them over, but the way to win them over is supposed to be a delicate balance where you're not hemorrhaging your base of support, because you cannot let the urban pop fall apart. Okay? You cannot let the urban population, black voters, brown voters, young voters in general, voters in college, students and the like, not come out and vote for you because they are just like too bored and too grossed out by or too depressed to go out and vote, because they just constantly hear you hugging and kissing the likes of Liz Cheney or saying you're going to have a Republican in your cabinet. It's not good. Okay? It is not good. She needs white women. I understand that. I'm not against that. But there's a way to do that while simultaneously still communicating objectively popular policies to the low and mid propensity voters on the Democratic Party side. But they haven't done that at all. They've hyper-focused on high propensity voters in general. They're banking on a low turnout election. That's not good. Anyway, having said that, other aspects of the campaign that I took issue with, of course, was the fact that her addressing the economic harm that people were experiencing, even though she was given a massive gift, where voters did not actually hold her responsible for the problems of the Biden administration and its impact on the economy and the inflation and the negative real wage growth that they experienced under Biden for a brief moment. That kind of stuff is unforgettable for a lot of voters, but they actually originally did not say Kamala Harris was responsible for that. Now, that's good. That's a fucking massive gift for Kamala Harris. What did she do with that gift? Not much. The price gouging stuff was great. Fantastic messaging, fantastic policy, fully on board with that, right? But they didn't go forward with that too aggressively. And instead, they kind of back-pocketed that. And I personally consider that a flub, okay? I was expecting a 2008 Obama style run, but instead we basically got a 2012 Obama run. And that's not good. Or worse, dare I say, a 2020 Joe Biden run. Actually worse than that, because it was more conservative than 2020. Anyway, so there's some good policies there, like combating price gouging. Fantastic, okay? Good defenses there. That Donald Trump's tariffs, which is the only economic policy that he's put forward, is actually a mass sales tax. Fantastic. Expert. 10 chef's kisses. Okay. 5 booms on that. Those are both great. Okay. Expanding Medicaid to at-home care. Fantastic. It's not enough. It's actually very marginal. And it's very frustrating that that's the only thing that the Democrats are pushing for. You should at least expand it down to 55. Like, you should lower the age. You should lower the age eligibility for Medicare to 55. That is literally the entry. That is like that's stepping in. Dental and vision as well. That's also important. They didn't really push that too much, but they realized that was actually popular messaging. So that definitely helped out. So on that front, that's great. Obviously, no separation from Biden on Gaza is a massive flub. That was a huge gimme. Donald Trump was beating Biden by like 30 points on the issue of Israel-Palestine. Donald Trump is now beating Kamala by the same percentage points on Israel-Palestine. And that's not a good idea. Overall, immigration, right-wing communication on immigration is not a good idea either, but that's a much larger, much more consequential conversation that we're not going to have right now. And I will just say that them dropping the Republicans are weird strategy was also a bad idea. But having said all of that, why do I still think Kamala Harris is going to win? Because a lot of people will say, Hassan, you've said this already. You've ripped into Kamala Harris left and right. It's because you hate a black woman. You don't want her to succeed. Is that the reason? No. These are very real considerations. These are very real criticisms that I think are perfectly fucking valid. I have time and time again showcased evidence, empirical evidence, messaging polls and whatnot to prove to you that what I'm saying is correct. And you can also go and watch those older videos as well. Okay? Now, I will, however, turn around and explain something very important to you. Okay? The person that was running an even worse campaign with also worse metrics overall, with a worse ceiling overall, was Donald Trump. Okay? That's it. While Kamala Harris made, in my opinion, a lot of communication mistakes, none were as bad as the routine garbanzo that you saw from Donald Trump throughout this entire process. Donald Trump's negatives are that he's too narcissistic and too chaotic and says a whole bunch of unhinged things. So much so that people who are in support of Donald Trump's ideology and ideals sometimes find themselves at odds with Donald Trump. Not to the same degree as like the MSNBC Never Trump Republicans, but certainly enough that they're like, I don't know if I'm going to go out and vote. Or in the finite amount of time that you have to make a convincing argument to not only have people be your supporters, but also go out and vote for you, Donald Trump fucked up big time. Nonstop, as a matter of fact. He had strong issues where he could have talked specifically about the economy, but there was no good policy on that front. He just kept saying, remember how good things were when I was president. Trying to hold on to the nostalgia factor and the reality that Americans have short-term memory. Okay? He just kept saying, remember how good shit was when I was president. But even then, he didn't even hit that point hard enough because he was entirely too predisposed with the anti-immigrant screeds. His economic policy was tariffs, which is a really stupid idea that absolutely zero people agree with, especially because Donald Trump never communicated what he was going to put tariffs on. He just said across the board on all goods, specifically coming from China, which again is idiotic because it would destroy his number one industry of his supporters, Trump merchandise, right? That was a huge issue. And also, like I said, Kamala Harris's campaign did good counter messaging on that issue. So they are capable of doing that when they want to do it by effectively showing everyone that tariffs are just a mass sales tax and that China's not fucking paying for it. It's actually American companies that are purchasing the Chinese manufactured goods that are paying for the tariff, and that cost will be offset. That will transfer over to the consumers. Okay, so that was a massive mistake. Another indication that Trump's campaign has lost the juice and the sauce, and also its capability of reading the room, or rather maybe reading the wrong room a little too much, was the anti-trans ads. Now, I've talked to people who work for campaigns. Okay, I talk to them all the time, off the record, off camera. And there are people who would shock you that also agreed that the Trump campaign, the anti-trans campaign, was actually a banger. I was shocked personally when I heard that, okay, from people. I was like, what? Are you serious? And I had to sit there and explain to them why this is not a banger at all. A lot of people in the DC bubble are lost in the sauce a little bit, okay? They're lost in the sauce a little bit, and it is a sober reminder for me that those people are also on Twitter. Okay? Yeah. The Beltway demons are also on Twitter all the fucking time, and their understanding of the world is also motivated by things that they see online. Okay? Oh, you're straight up wrong. Anti-trans rhetoric plays great to the base, and they're winning more and more anti-trans legislation every year, man. Yeah, that's right. It's so popular that they always have to package anti-trans legislation that literally fails usually if they try to actually do it through a democratic process, like the North Carolina trans bathroom bill. They had to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to tie it to something that people do care about, which is sports. A meritocratic approach to sports is something that Americans still believe. And that's the only one that has actually penetrated public consciousness in a country where 64% of the population still say trans people are disproportionately targeted and it's unfair. People might be transphobic themselves. We heard the Trump supporter that Owen Jones was talking to. Look at the situation and basically say, I don't want my child to be trans. And then Owen Jones was like, okay, what if your child was like friends with a trans person? And the guy said, yeah, I wouldn't stop them. I'm not transphobic. There's a reason why even Jake Paul, who is incredibly transphobic, still feels the need to say that he does not hate anyone, including trans people, because at the end of the day, everyone's a fucking liberal in this goddamn country. And that's something that you need to remember. Okay? What this means is that while most people think trans people are weird, most people are definitely slanted towards transphobia, given how rigid the gender binaries are in the way that it's been taught and how deeply personal our gender is in the way that we understand it, even though it's outdated. Okay? Even though it is completely outdated, people still do not vote for anti-trans legislation. So if you have a finite amount of time to make a convincing argument, if you need to get people to come out and fucking vote for you in the polls, you cannot run on an anti-trans panic narrative. Okay? You can't. You just simply cannot do that. And there is already a fantastic example, fantastic proof for this not working, and that is the 2022 midterms. People think it's weird to constantly and consistently shit on trans people. When it comes down to the election, most people are like, I just want food on my table, man. I care about the kitchen table shit, okay? And trans issues are not kitchen table shit. This is something that I have consistently talked about and consistently defended, okay? That is a big mistake for the Trump campaign. The constant hyper-focus, hyper-fixation comes across as weird to the normal whites, okay? It does. It comes across as weird unless you're hyper online and you watch Matt Walsh and you mainline the anti-trans stuff and you're participating in like the fucking firebombing campaigns of like sending bomb threats to the children's hospital or whatever, which is a tiny, minuscule percentage of the Republican base. Most of the rest of the Republican Party are not that motivated. And all of the anti-trans legislation that has passed in this country has passed in the state legislature. That's it. And state legislatures are inherently undemocratic because of the way that redistricting works, because of the way that districts are drawn. That's it. That's it. You can tell me all day, every day. You can tell me all day, every day that transphobia and trans panic is a fucking really resilient, really good message, really good narrative. It's not. There is no evidence to suggest this. There is actually only evidence to show, to prove that it has been an outward, unsuccessful way to campaign. That's it. A lot of people, even in the Republican base of support, view the anti-trans weirdos in the same exact way that they view the anti-abortion weirdos. You start looking like the type of dude who's really sweaty and really gross, parked outside of a fucking Planned Parenthood, yelling at a 14-year-old trying to get fucking birth control. Normal whites in the suburbs do not like that. They don't want to be associated with that. They find it weird. They might be transphobic themselves, but they still find it weird. This goes back to my theory of permissible bigotry. Very important theory. I know there's a lot of normies in here right now. They've probably never heard me talk about this shit. Okay, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. Due to social conditioning in a country like the United States of America, built on the foundation of white supremacy, indigenous genocide, and the continuation of chattel slavery, and an endless defense for capitalism, America is the perfect proto-capitalist nation, even before capitalism was codified and identified. There is a level of permissible bigotry that most people are on board with. I'll give you an example. It's called dog whistles, right? The Leet Atwater quote comes to mind. I'm going to run it really quickly so you understand exactly what I mean. Okay? This is a perfect example of permissible bigotry. Okay? This is Lee Atwater's famous 1981 interview on the Southern Strategy. There's going to be a warning. He's going to say the N-word a lot. Okay? Just letting you know. In 1981, the legendary brutal campaign consultant Lee Atwater was working in Ronald Reagan's White House when he was interviewed by Alexander Lemise. This is what he had to say. In this audio made public for the first time ever, Atwater lays out how Republicans can win the vote of races without sounding racist themselves.
You handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you, backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing.
Yeah. By 2024, you can't say any of those things, so you say DEI, you say woke. Back in the day, it used to be affirmative action, right? States' rights is still a way to vaguely gesture to this kind of bigotry. Now, the question that I have for many Americans that are listening, that are tuning in right now, is why the need for dog whistles? Because there is only so much openly vitriolic, openly racist sentiment that Americans will be on board with. A Klansman wears a robe for a reason. A Nazi never wants to be called a Nazi for a reason. Racist people who are, some of them are your family members, you probably know what their opinions are, will not be on board with overt racism. There's a barrier, and that barrier changes. There's a boundary that changes of like what is permissible bigotry. And that happens through trends, that happens through, systematic differences, systematic changes. But ultimately, there is a level of permissible bigotry that you can get away with. An example of this is Donald Trump will say Kamala Harris is a low IQ person, right? That's a dog whistle. A black woman, Donald Trump is basically saying like she's a low IQ individual, she's a low IQ person. He can't say she's, I'm not going to repeat it, but like there are certain things that he can't say. The campaign is aware that, for example, Tony Hinchcliffe wanted to call her a cunt, right? They stopped Tony Hinchcliffe from saying that. They didn't stop Tony Hinchcliffe from calling Puerto Rico a trash island, an island full of trash, which of course hilariously fucking backfired on the campaign. But that is the difference between permissible bigotry and bigotry that goes beyond that. You can talk about dominating women if you are a Republican. You can talk about being misogynistic, or you can be misogynistic to a certain degree. But once you reach above that degree, once you go beyond the degree of permissible bigotry, you are starting to lose people on your side. Okay? The difference is, for example, when you talk about black people, as a Republican, you can't say that, black people are inferior, genetically inferior, low IQ across the board, inherently violent, and must be squashed by the police force. If you say that, which is the underlying sentiment that you do believe, people are going to get grossed out by that. They're going to say, ew, you're gross. You're going too far. You can't get into phrenology. What you have to say instead is that we have to have police because there are a lot of violence happening in these communities. There's a violent culture in these communities. That is the dog whistle. And the reason why that dog whistle exists, I'm trying to explain to you, is because people who are even racist themselves don't want to be outwardly racist. They don't want to be associated with someone who is outwardly racist. Okay? That doesn't mean that those people aren't racist themselves. And that is because a lot of people want to feel like they have the best interest of others in mind while simultaneously advocating against it. Okay? So, Donald Trump has, in the past, danced around that permissible bigotry and has had moments where he has gone above. But he's been able to defend himself successfully in 2016 against attacks that were launched against him. But now that he is juiceless and sauceless, he no longer has that capacity. He just lets it rip quite frequently, as a matter of fact. And that, in my opinion, is why when he went on that national stage in front of Kamala Harris and said, Haitians are eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, and there's nothing you can do about it. And when he was asked about that, he was like, I saw it on TV. Even the majority of Republicans thought that was weird. Now, you might not recognize that if your only access to Republican communication is Twitter and YouTube. But when you look at 60 million people viewing that, okay, they have a very different perspective on this stuff. And these are the people who themselves might be on board with mass deportation. Okay? And I don't think a lot of people recognize that. A lot of people in the Republican side do not recognize that. Okay? That's the problem. It's not going to have an immediate and noticeable impact in the polls if that's what you're looking for. But messaging polls that were conducted afterwards showed us such. Okay? There is a level of permissible bigotry. Okay? If you go above that level of permissible bigotry, you come across as gross. That's the reason why J.D. Vance early on was shit on nonstop, was deeply unpopular, because in his endless brown nosing to like some of the grossest podcasters out there, he did the podcast route before he became the vice presidential pick. And in those uncovered interviews, he spoke about women as though they were broodmares, as though they were, they had one purpose, and that was to breed. You can't say that out loud. When you say that out loud and the rest of society hears you say that out loud, they're going to be like, ew, what the fuck are you saying? Even if people themselves personally believe that. Central Committee, thank you for the raid, by the way. And that I think is a massive problem for Trump. When Trump consistently talks about immigration to a degree that is seemingly unconscionable by people who want those policies, okay, he's not talking about the economy. Every moment that he spends saying 10 million Guatemalans are doing rapes, they're inventing new ways of raping people, that's a moment that he could have been talking about the economy, and he chose to really fucking ham on this narrative. And that's why you have to look at what Trump's surrogates are saying versus look at what Trump is saying. Trump's surrogates don't do that shit. They only talk about the economy. They literally only go, remember how fucking good things were? Remember how good things were when Trump was president and how bad things are right now? Please stop asking me about, Trump's latest fucking stupid thing that he said. Okay? That's it. You know that Trump's people in his corner are telling him, please, sir, shut the fuck up about immigrants. Don't talk about it this much. Just talk about the economy, please. Okay? You want to know how I know that? Because Trump constantly goes up in front of those fucking people at those rallies and says, my staffers keep telling me, don't talk about the migrants, but I'm going to keep talking about it. They say, please, sir, talk about the economy. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the migrants. And then everyone goes, oh, like he fucking flexes, like talking about how, brain rotted he is, as though it's a benefit. And that, I think, that and consistently saying you're going to sick the military on, your enemies from within, and the fact that you have still not given up on the 2020 election makes you look like a sore loser for a lot of people. These are the issues that Donald Trump is very weak on, and he has consistently leaned on his weak ass issues. Even on strong issues that he has, like immigration, He's going above and beyond. He's making normies uncomfortable. And that's a problem. Do you understand? These are some of the reasons why I am telling you, these are some of the reasons why I think that Donald Trump has run an even worse campaign than Hillary Clinton. More importantly, Donald Trump is tapped out. Donald Trump was not only the president for 4 years, but Donald Trump also lost in 2020. That means that he has already reached peak Donald Trump. He's already maxed out on the amount of votes that he has gotten. He will never get that many votes ever again, especially because of, mail-in ballots and during COVID, obviously, turnout was significantly higher because it's easier to vote. So for Donald Trump, the pathway to victory is a lot harder than Kamala Harris. Okay? He already has hit his ceiling. So that was already a massive issue for him. And he tried to basically pick up votes from wherever he could. That's the reason why he did like the Aiden Ross style, the podcast. That's the reason why he went after the podcaster vote. That's the reason why he's going after young men specifically. Young men who are low propensity voters in general and are not reliable voters at all. And there is a way to win over those young men to ensure that those young men come out and vote for you. Donald Trump did not do that. Ironically enough, Donald Trump, when he was communicating to young men directly on the podcast circuit, did what I consider harm reduction strategies, but from the right. We hear this all the time on the left. Harm reduction is a massive, massive part of the Democratic Party turnout strategy. It's a fucking stupid ass way to do things. But Donald Trump was doing it as well. He did not tell young men why they must vote for him. He simply told young men, don't vote for Kamala Harris, vote for me instead. That is not going to be an effective turnout strategy for low propensity voters, which is why I'm still stating that I don't think that Donald Trump is going to drive massive turnout from young men that will come out and vote for him because he didn't offer them anything. With Hillary Clinton, he at least had so much opportunity to just keep highlighting how toxic this person was. Okay? Hillary Clinton was a beacon of all of the things that's wrong with American politics for many people. So he could at least get a couple of these like moderates or people who are independent, people who are low propensity voters to come out and vote for him because it was voting against Hillary Clinton. But you can't do that with Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris is a generic Democrat. Okay? Kamala Harris is a generic Democrat. Donald Trump in 2016 was able to present himself as an anti-establishment vote, as someone who was going to blow up the institutions. And if you were angry with the institutions, you were looking forward to what he was going to do. You were like, you know what, fuck it, I'll take a shot in the dark. Donald Trump also presented himself as a different kind of Republican in comparison to the rest of the party. He was incredibly moderate on social issues, with the exception of immigration. But he was ultimately viewed by the broader populace as a moderate on a lot of social issues. Donald Trump was pro-LGBT in 2016. Okay? All of these reasons, all of these factors at play is the reason why I think Kamala Harris is still slated to win this election. Okay? That's it. These are the reasons as to why. These are the vibes-based analysis on top of everything else, on top of the polls, that make me consider, that cause me to believe that Kamala's chances are better than Donald Trump's chances tomorrow. There's obviously a lot of facts involved in this as well, in terms of how certain messages work and how certain messages don't work. But ultimately, this is why I think that I am still marginally favoring Kamala Harris winning the election. Okay? This does not mean that Kamala Harris ran a fantastic campaign. It doesn't mean that at all. As a matter of fact, I think that Kamala Harris could have run a much better campaign and built on the momentum that she had gained early on. But she didn't do that. She could have still captured the attention of these suburban white women without refusing to advocate for any sort of policies that would help her base. So what this election is going to come down to tomorrow is this. Kamala Harris will win if she has not hemorrhaged enough of her base of support, black and brown voters, young voters in general, progressive-minded folks, or people who want, like, decent policies. If she has not hemorrhaged enough from the urban population centers, and she has been able to successfully detangle a lot of the college-educated suburban whites, which they've gone after pretty aggressively, okay, and swing them away from Trump, like 2020 Trump voters going to Kamala Harris, there's not an indication in the polls that this has been successful so far. And maybe even bring out people who obviously care about abortion and care about this restriction coming down as a consequence of Donald Trump's Supreme Court. Kamala Harris will win. On the other hand, Donald Trump's shot in the dark approach is if he is able to not only drive turnout from low and mid propensity voters, which he's defeating Kamala Harris by massive margins on, if he's able to do massive turnout come election day, okay, if the early voters have not cannibalized the election day voters for the Republican Party, then Donald Trump will win. And it will come down to the state of Pennsylvania. Okay? Kamala Harris's chances of winning this election, after looking at all of these facts and even matching the vibes, I guess, especially when you look at past performance for the Democratic Party, or if you look at current performance for the Democratic Party and the way that people view the Democratic Party overall in the United States of America versus the Republican Party, Kamala Harris's chances of winning this election are slightly higher than Donald Trump's chances of winning the election, because Donald Trump has a tougher go here. Okay? Can you explain the Red Mirage stuff that we'll see tomorrow? I have heard stuff about it, but don't understand it. I mean, this happened in 2020 as well. On election night, votes are tabulated, but those are simply based off of, like, when a news outlet says Kamala Harris is projected to win, that's just a simple projection. The way that they calculate that is by looking at past performance, looking at the likelihood that a certain state is going to go in one direction over the other. And the Red Mirage basically is, no, Red Mirage is not 2022. Red Mirage basically is because Republicans in past election cycles have had a tendency to go and do same-day voting, that those votes are counted earlier and faster than mail-in ballots and early voters. And this varies by state, but that is the reason why it looks like, Republicans are winning in certain states. Early results give a false indication that the Republicans are actually winning by massive margins. And then once all the votes are counted, or when you look at certain projections, you can make a better analysis on who is projected to win, judging by past performance. A lot of people don't realize this, but like the official vote count does not come for sometimes weeks, if not months later. Most of this, most of the winners and losers are declared on the night of the election due to projections. That's why the media will say Associated Press is projecting a Kamala Harris victory. Now, they're usually right. There are very few instances where the media has ever gotten it wrong. And this was a big deal that especially Fox News projected certain states, Biden winning certain states on election night in 2020. In 2020, that was a massively consequential thing that they did, where they actually operated with truth and integrity to a certain degree. Ironic, I know. And that really softened the amount of counter narratives that Trump could launch towards, like, oh, we're winning the election. He was very upset, if you recall. Okay. Now, having said that, I do not know if Fox News will do that this time around. And I'm genuinely worried that they will not be honest about their projection. So we shall see. Yeah, it is incredibly rare where a projection is wrong. That's why the Dewey defeats Truman is an iconic image for a reason. Exactly. So I think, yeah, Fox News announced their projections for Arizona to go to Biden before New York Times and Associated Press. This was a major point of contention in the 2020 cycle. It actually was legitimately helpful. They were right, but I'm saying that like it was a unique moment for Fox News to be correct and actually maintain integrity on election night that I think ultimately cut away from a lot of the counter narratives that Trump was building on in terms of the election being stolen from them, right? So I think that I think I'm scared, but I think that there will be some unrest tomorrow. I don't think that is a wild thing to predict. I am genuinely fearful about this, but I do believe that there will be some unrest tomorrow because of the way that the Republican Party now operates, because of the way that Donald Trump has basically geared his base into believing that if he loses, or if it even seems like he's losing, then the election is stolen. Now, I don't know what kind of ground game they have in terms of like launching a Brooks Brothers style riot in each individual swing state, but it's definitely something that I am fearful of. Okay? I think it's not necessarily January 6th that we should be worried about, but more so Brooks Brothers is what we should be worried about happening in numerous states, in numerous cities. Do you think that a big repudiation with really high Dem vote count would make that more or less likely? Honest question. No, that would make it less likely, especially if like Democrats come out in massive numbers and like all of the polling on low propensity voters was wrong. And it was actually the Democrats that were securing a lot of low propensity voters, which would be copium. I've never fucking said that. The reason why I haven't like paid a lot of attention to that is because that is copium. There is no evidence to suggest that. For people asking, what is the Brooks Brothers riot? I think it's important for people to learn what the Brooks Brothers riot is. It seems like a lot of people don't know what this is. So I will explain it. Okay. This is from the 2000 election. And that is when they stole. Might be worth watching what you said on election night in 2020 when Trump tried the last time he was going to steal it.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. Sure, the integrity. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. Okay?
What? Oh, he's doing
it's
it.
A very sad.
The mad lad.
It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment, and
he's doing it.
We will win this, and as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it. So I just.
Yeah. So this is legitimately fucking scary shit. Okay, I can't begin to explain to you what kind of downstream consequences this will have. I hope that the governors and the states are ready for Donald Trump to do such a thing. So we'll see.
Stop the count, stop the fraud, stop the count, stop the fraud, stop the count.
This is the Brooks Brothers riot that helped make George W. Bush president. Some of the people involved in this were, a lot of the people involved in this were obviously Republican Party operatives. Some of the people involved in this became, Brett Kavanaugh, a part of the United States Supreme Court.
Miami-Dade County, where police actually had to break up a scuffle this morning outside the canvassing board.
Actually, you know what? Let's do a deeper dive into this.
Every 4 years, Americans across this great nation put our differences aside to join hands and collectively lose our fucking minds over the presidential election.
They're eating the dogs.
Now, we've seen some pretty crazy stuff in recent years, but if you're thinking 2020 was the most hog-wild election in modern history, you have absolutely got to hear about what went down in the year 2000. Because if you're some kind of rizless Gen Z damn Danieling sheesh lord, you may be surprised to hear that in the year 2000, there was a literal and verifiable stolen presidential election. And even if you're over the age of 30 and maybe remember hearing something about hanging chads and Florida recounts, the details are certifiably insane. And if nothing else, it's good to just remind ourselves of the fragility of elections in the United States and why your vote, yes, I'm talking to you, really does matter in shaping the next 4 years. And hell, I'll say it, I'm crazy, maybe even beyond. Hi, I'm Raleigh Williams, a guy with a climate science and policy degree and a raging obsession with an election that happened almost a quarter of a century ago. And this is a video about stealing a presidential election. Welcome to Climate Town.
Yeah. A lot of people, especially younger people, are not familiar with the 2000 elections where the Republicans actually successfully stole the election. They lost the general vote. They lost the popular vote. And the only way that they were able to win the state of Florida was because George W. Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, was the literal fucking governor. And the right-wing Supreme Court at the time allowed them to steal this election, and they successfully intercepted the recount process by starting what is known as the Brooks Brothers riot. This was carefully crafted and conducted by Roger Stone and many Republican staffers, including but not limited to Amy Covid Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh.
In the year 1999, a significant portion of the country genuinely believed that when the date rolled over from 99 to 00, all of our computers would self-destruct, launch the nukes, and destroy America's economy. It was called Y2K, and it was a dumb thing to be afraid of, but in their defense, in 1999, computers looked like this. But the new year came and went, and with Y2K safely in the rearview mirror, Americans could focus on the two things that really mattered. The hit single Who Let the Dogs Out by the Baha Men,
Who let the dogs out?
and the 2000 presidential election.
Choose your character.
In the blue corner was Al Gore. He cut his teeth as a Democratic senator from Tennessee before becoming vice president to a saxophone-toting, sexual relations with that woman-denying president by the name of Bill Clinton. Gore released a best-selling book about global warming and the environment back here in 1992. He released the award-winning documentary An Inconvenient Truth that supercharged climate change awareness here in 2006. But here in 2000, he's running for president.
Today.
This is actually one of your worst takes. I watched this happen. The Gore campaign only ever sought selective recounts, and the only way he'd actually win is by admitting votes that weren't legal. Yeah, the problem that occurred. I mean, he'll go into it, and you'll see what happened. The problem in this situation is that very obviously, like, an insane amount of votes were directly falsified. Okay. An insane amount of votes very clearly went to candidates that they were not supposed to go to as a consequence of butterfly ballots and hanging chads.
I announce that I am a candidate for president.
I'm sure he will describe it.
And in the red corner is George W. Bush. Not to be confused with his father and the president from 8 years earlier, George H.W. Bush. George Regular W. Bush was a Texas oil man who founded an oil and gas exploration firm, then became the co-owner of the Texas Rangers, and then became the governor of Texas. And in the year 2000, he's the Republican candidate for president.
We will renew America's purpose.
It's Gore versus Bush. It's climate guy versus Texas oil man. It's election 2000, and it's right now. And if you're wondering why they're all so focused on a big map.
Yeah, don't forget the Florida Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, was the co-chair of Bush's election commission. She literally was the decision to call Florida on election night and not restart it until the Florida Supreme Court told her to resume counting.
It's because America doesn't have a simple democratic election where the candidate with the most votes wins. We have the much stupider electoral college, where states are assigned point values and each candidate tries to win the highest stakes board game on earth. And that means close elections can often come down to just a couple of states that could swing either way. But remember, this is also a TV show, which means networks are foaming at the mouth to call states as early and often as they can, filling up the map and making politics feel like Wheel of Fortune.
George Bush, he carries his home state of Texas.
Washington State goes for Gore.
Sarah, you hit the jackpot with law.
And then, at 7:49 p.m. Eastern Time, NBC felt they asked enough Floridians exiting the polls who they voted for, and they were ready to make the call.
So sorry to interrupt you. Mike, you know I wouldn't do this if it weren't big. Florida goes for Al Gore.
It was massive. Florida had 25 electoral votes, and if Gore took it, the Bush path to victory looked rail thin. The other networks followed suit, and it seemed like a wrap then and there. Except it wasn't a wrap, because as actual voting data replaced exit polling data, Gore's lead began to shrink. And something positively weird was going on because Florida polling stations were inundated with voters calling to say they were confused about the ballot and they were worried that their vote might have gone to the wrong person. Curious! Then, 2 hours later at 9:55 p.m.,
NBC News is now taking Florida out of Vice President Gore's.
And the reason for why they did that, was because fuck, I can't find it. God damn it. I fucked it up. I was going to do a great segue to, oh my God, I will vote. And I fucked it up. I couldn't link it fast enough. God damn it. Bro had a stroke. No. Wash streamer. I know. Please subscribe to me. I'm a wash streamer. This is why they did it.
And together, we will make America great again.
Donald Trump. Ay, 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 por Dios. Voy a votar por Donald Trump. That's how it happened. This is the story. Okay. I'm not running ads. My contract's over with Amazon, with Twitch. So I'm not running ads, but in the future, if I decide to run ads again, you might want to subscribe to avoid those ads. Or if you want to send me links and things of that nature, including Yo voy a votar por Donald Trump. Twitch Prime is free. Also, yeah, links like this. Exactly. Links like this. Twitch Prime is free, folks. Or you can subscribe for $6, or you can get gifted a sub if you're lucky. Let's continue.
Column and putting it back in the too close to call column.
As the other states fell into place, only Florida was left undecided.
Thank you, Bowl,
which means
for the 10
whoever
gift
won
subs.
Florida would win the election. Then at 2:16 a.m., roughly 6 hours past their target demo's bedtime,
Fox News now projects George W. Bush the winner in Florida, and thus it appears the winner of the presidency of the United States.
The other networks followed suit, and Al Gore
No, I see every message, including this one.
was left sitting in a hotel room staring at every major news network in the country, telling him he had lost an election that all the exit polling data said he had won. So Al Gore picked up the phone, called Bush to concede, and then left to go deliver the official concession speech. The thing is,
Hassan Surplus Value,
Al
thank
Gore
you.
had not lost the presidential election. Yeah, and he would have known that if he had thought to call his own numbers guy, Michael Hooley, who was keeping careful track of the Florida vote.
He said, we're at the War Memorial, and I asked why. And he said, we're about to concede. And I said, for what? We haven't lost.
The whole thing was a clusterfuck in a number of ways, but most importantly, it was so close that it had automatically triggered Florida Election Code 102.141, legally requiring an automatic recount of all the votes in the state. This election was not over, but Al Gore didn't know that, and was literally walking to the stage to concede the election when his senior advisor David Morehouse ran his ass down and stopped him. The drama. Imagine that moment. I wish I had a clip of it. I don't, but I super wish I did. Luckily, HBO made a made-for-TV movie about the 2000 election, and it did include this goofy-ass reenactment.
No, Mr. Vice President! Mr. Vice President! Mr. Vice President!
Mr. Vice President? Mr. Vice President? Sir?
I'm not going to keep
Please,
him waiting.
please, Mr. Vice President. There's a problem with the numbers in Florida.
That's amazing.
And then, in the most awkward phone call of his entire life, Gore called Bush back to unconcede. As you can imagine, Bush was pretty fucking pissed. The conversation got heated, and Gore apparently ended the call with something to the effect of, "I don't care what your little brother says, this isn't over." And that's a pretty badass thing to say. It's also a little confusing, but in this case it makes perfect sense because George Bush's little brother is Jeb Bush. And in the year 2000, Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida.
Uh-oh.
I told my brother that we were going to carry Florida for him. Is that going to be a truthful statement?
Uh-oh.
It better be.
So the race...
Jeb! It's fucking Jeb! It's Jeb time!
Move to the Sunshine State, where the 5.8 million votes cast in
Please
Florida
clap.
would be machine recounted to see if Bush's 1,784 vote lead would hold. And as the computers rescanned the votes, Bush's lead steadily shrank down to just 327 votes. But that's not all. There were an additional 171,000 ballots that the machines had just skipped because either they couldn't read any vote or they read multiple votes. Which makes sense if you remember the many, many, many calls on election day about confusing ballots and defective equipment. These are the same computers that we thought might fire nuclear weapons at Russia if they weren't sure what year it was. Good thing Florida state law says we'll take these 171,000 ballots and recount them by hand, right?
Florida law, and the law in many other states, calls for a careful check by real people of the machine results in elections like this one.
But Team Bush had a slightly different take. They wanted to not count any more votes.
Yeah, they did a stop the count. Now, some of you probably remember when they did that exact same thing in the 2020 election. It was additionally funny, however, because on some states they were saying stop the count. In others, they were saying count the votes. It was very confusing. But that didn't stop Republicans from advocating for whichever position suited their purpose. Now, a little problem that the Republicans had during the 2020 election is that, well, the Democrats were winning. Okay? It's a lot harder to stop the actual normal process when the votes are still being counted. I don't know if they'll stop. I don't know if that is going to stop the Republicans from trying to stop this process this time around. But it's definitely a harder thing to do versus, oh no, the votes have been counted, it's over, you lost.
And declared George Bush president immediately. And in situations like this, you'd hope there'd be someone to step in and say, get f***ed, we're counting all the votes. I'd even settle for a simple, sorry, but counting votes is how democracy worked. And that person should have been Florida Secretary of State Katherine Harris. Now, in a wild coincidence, the co-chair of George Bush's Florida presidential campaign was also a woman named Katherine Harris, and in an even wilder coincidence, it was the same person. That's right, both the Florida governor and the Secretary of State in charge of maintaining the integrity of the election had actively campaigned for George Bush, which is a really hard position to be in if you're Al Gore. Luckily, he did have one thing going for him. He got more votes in...
I will say something that might come across as controversial, but I think the state of politics now is even worse than that. Like somehow where there's a direct conflict of interest there. But I think right now the state of politics is even worse than that, where like Donald Trump has put his loyalists in every fucking position within the Republican Party. And now there is even a greater partisan split, and it doesn't fucking matter. Like you don't even have to be related to Donald Trump at all. Okay, you can just openly be like, I'm an insane person, and I think the elections were stolen last time, and now I'm in charge. I'm tasked with the election here. I'm gonna be sitting and doing the fucking counting myself personally.
Florida than George Bush did. That's right. We now know for sure that Gore got more votes in Florida than Bush. By kind of a lot. Unfortunately, some serious problems with Florida's voting system invalidated literally thousands of ballots that would have gone for Gore. Good God, people, this election is a mess. First off, thousands of voters across the whole state of Florida showed up to the polls and found they're not allowed to vote. That's right, newly elected governor and longtime little brother Jeb Bush oversaw a purge of the voter rolls.
Interestingly, this strategy And this is the reason why I've always maintained the position that Donald Trump was not unique in the way that he said that, like, illegals are voting or whatever the fuck. This strategy has always been in place. This strategy was first originally advocated for by Paul Weyrich of the Moral Majority. Okay, this is a ultra Christian evangelical group that originally created the massively consequential evangelical base of support for the Republican Party. Paul Weyrich very openly used to say, a lot of you have goo goo gaga government syndrome. Many of you think everyone should go out and vote. You're stupid. Our goal is to stop people from going out to vote because, we don't want certain people to go out and vote. This is straight up the play. They've always been here it is. Goo goo government syndrome. In 1980, Paul Weyrich, the founding father of the conservative movement, addressed a seminal religious right gathering here in Dallas, or held in Dallas in the fall of 1980.
Have what I call the goo goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Yep. Who's this? That's Paul Weyrich. He's a real fucking demon. One of the worst demons in a sea of other incredibly consequential demons in American politics. He is the godfather of the modern conservative movement, I would say. A Catholic man himself who recognized that the evangelical base of support was just waiting to be activated. Anyway, so why would he self-report that unprompted? Why not? He was successful. He has been successful. You are watching how successful he is. These people don't care. They run this shit. Now, one thing you have to understand is that like, in order for Republicans to get away with voter suppression in the form of adding unnecessary hurdles to how people vote, whether it be voter ID initiatives, whether it be purging people from the voter rolls, voter registry, there needs to be a reason for that, right? You can't just be like, nah, we got to purge people from the voter rolls. You'd be like, that seems like a strange thing. Why is the question that comes to mind. And the answer to the why is illegals voting. Okay? Republicans have consistently lied about voter fraud in an effort to do election fraud or voter suppression. There is no evidence to show that there is a tremendous number of illegal voters out there. And as a matter of fact, there's only evidence to show that this does not happen. Okay? It is so marginal that it is statistically insignificant. Republicans have tried to prove that there is mass voter fraud happening. Illegals are coming in and they're voting for the Democratic Party over and over and over again. That has never been the reality. As a matter of fact, the reality is the exact opposite. That does not happen. Every single time they have set forth election committees, election integrity committees, including but not limited to Donald Trump, who also did this, bipartisan committees tasked with looking at election integrity, and George W. Bush himself did this as well. They have always found that there is no voter fraud. There is virtually 0.001% voter fraud occurring, and that is so statistically irrelevant that it would be ridiculous to say that this is happening en masse. Having said that, however, Donald Trump greatly expanded on that messaging and followed it to its logical conclusion that it definitely is happening, and it's definitely happened this time around. It happened in the last election cycle. It's always happening. So I'm just not going to agree to the results of the election. Okay? They're gearing up for that already. Donald Trump has, this time around, in this election cycle, said, elections are about who has a better legal team. Republican National Committee is now suing the city of Milwaukee over observer access to early voting polling places, access on election day. And they've already started, and they're not going to stop, just so you understand. But anyway, even the quote-unquote normal Republican Party has engaged in this exact same method and this exact same sentiment that Donald Trump expanded on, okay, followed to its logical conclusion on, which is why I fucking hate the Republican Party. One of the many different reasons why I hate the Republican Party and why I hate Democrats who say, we want a normal Republican Party. We want a strong Republican Party. Bitch, this is what their strong and normal Republican Party was fucking doing. Let's continue.
That accidentally included a lot of legal voters who overwhelmingly voted Democratic.
He looked at the roll and he looked at me and he said, we have a problem. You're not on the roll.
Sorry about that. Now down here in Palm Beach County, they used a ballot with such bad graphic design that thousands of Democratic Jewish voters accidentally voted for the alt-right anti-Semitic candidate Pat Buchanan.
The Democrats were listed second. I punched the second hole. And that second hole was for Pat Buchanan.
And this is not just like my opinion, man.
Yeah.
Here's Pat Buchanan himself.
If the two candidates they pushed were Buchanan and Gore, almost certainly those are Al Gore's votes and not mine.
And as if printing your ballots on a bunch of goddamn origami cranes isn't bad enough, voters up here in Duval County were instructed to vote on every page of their ballot. But anyone who followed those instructions had their vote invalidated because there were 2 pages of presidential candidates. And these aren't just like a couple of votes. In Florida, there was a vote for Gore on 84,000 of these invalid multi-vote ballots compared to just 37,000 multi-vote ballots that included Bush. But the Bush legal team was prepared to swear on their mother's lives that a bunch of elderly Jewish Democrats had voted alt-right and that the multi-vote ballots
Like voted for an anti-Semite, like an open anti-Semite.
were uncountable because technically there's no way to tell for sure.
By the way, that right there is another like change in attitude where you had an overt anti-Semite go on television and be like, these Jews did not vote for me. Okay. Can you imagine like a Richard Spencer type saying some shit like that now? Fuck no. Absolutely not. Okay. Like that guy was the OG alt-right guy. Now the alt-right is packaged directly under the MAGA banner. It's just not like a thing. That's not like, can you imagine a Nick Fuentes type person saying that shit now? Fuck no. Absolutely not.
Sure who the voter was trying to vote for. Not even if the candidates were Al Gore and also popular write-in candidate Al Gore.
You want to be ideologically pure, or do you want to win? They said we want to win.
And under the time pressure, there seemed to be no practical way for the Gore legal team to contest any of those multi-votes, the accidental Buchanan votes, or the purge votes. That's thousands of votes flushed away. But wait, because there was a ballot issue that they could go after. In some counties, voters have to punch out little paper circles known as chads. It sounds simple, but sometimes that chad hangs on for dear life. And other times, that chad receptacle fills up so goddamn full that you can't punch yours out at all. Now you got yourself one of the thousands of pregnant or dimpled chad ballots that never got counted. But since these chad-stricken no votes could indicate just one candidate, the Gore team set their sights on hand recounting ballots with pregnant or dimpled or swinging chads, and in doing so, ushered in a dynasty of just the absolute hackiest talk show jokes.
I had to go to the doctor today. You know why? I have a hanging chad.
And so the entire 2000 presidential election basically came down to 61,000 ballots in Florida that machines thought were blank. Would they be counted or would they be thrown away? We'll find out next time. Just kidding, let's find out right now. The Gore team struck first by requesting recounts in just 4 heavily Democratic counties where they thought they'd uncover a boatload of dimpled and hanging chad ballots with Al Gore's name all over them. The Bush team immediately sues to stop the hand recounts on the grounds that Gore was selecting favorable counties. Gore counters in a televised address.
I am also prepared, if Governor Bush prefers, to include in this recount all the counties in the entire state of Florida.
Bush ignores the offer and doubles down on the lawsuit to stop the 4 recounts, but loses the case and the recounts are a go. Point Gore. But the Bush bench is deep. They had to let the recount start, but no one said they had to let it finish. So Secretary of State and Team Bush MVP Katherine Harris tightened the recount deadline, and Republicans worked to slow down the actual vote counting itself. They argued over every vote.
Vote for 6 Republican Party challenges.
4 more votes for Gore. Election Supervisor Jane Carroll, a Republican, voted against this count.
They had to shut down the counting temporarily because the canvassing board members had to run to court to go appear before the judge to talk about whether or not we were eating chads.
Katherine Harris then attempted to stop the entire hand recount early.
I've decided it is my duty under Florida law to exercise my discretion in denying these requested amendments.
But was denied by the Florida Supreme Court. Undeterred, Katherine Harris follows up by stating she won't accept any recounts unless they're completely finished in the next 3 days. The Gore legal team says, hey, you can't do that, and the Florida
She's in jail, right? What? No, she was elected shortly after this.
Supreme Court steps in and says, stop f***ing around, and gives them a week to do the recount. There was only one question left on everybody's mind. Who let the dogs out? Sorry, no. Who would win this election? With the recount in full swing, things looked very good for Gore. He picked up 93 new votes and
virtually every single person that was involved in this process was elevated through the ranks of the Republican Party. Like almost every single one, including but not limited to 2 Supreme Court justices that Donald Trump put in the Supreme Court. Okay? Roger Stone was the one who implemented the Brooks Brothers riot, big Trump loyalist, as you guys know. He is like seen as a hatchet man and is seen as like a deeply unserious person in general now. But like every single person was like directly elevated through the ranks of the Republican Party for their loyal servitude.
In Volusia County, and if their projections were right, Gore would win another 300 to 400 votes in Palm Beach, another 100 in Miami-Dade, and up to 500 in Broward County. Even on the low side, that would be enough to put Al Gore right back on top. Pretty good news for the
remember how close this election is, okay? Remember how close this election is. Like, they literally, you lost your chance at a free sub? Wait, why? I'll always take it. Like, not only did Al Gore already win the popular vote, he would have won Florida as well if the recount process took place in the way that it was supposed to. And they were like, nope, not happening.
Democrats. The Republicans, on the other hand, weren't about to let a lead slip away. They devised a new method to ensure none of those votes got counted. In Miami-Dade, a young Roger Stone had teamed up with other Republican operatives, and while the hand recount was happening on the 18th floor of the Clark Center building, a horde of what appeared to be angry Floridian protesters stormed the building. Stop the count, stop the fraud. An instant classic. This horde of men in suits, banging on windows and attempting to
stop the count, stop the fraud.
Disrupt an American presidential election would become known as the Brooks Brothers riot, after one of Gore's lawyers was chased down and harassed for the crime of having a sample ballot in his hand. The Miami-Dade canvassing board felt sufficiently threatened, and they had had enough. They stopped the recount. And if you're wondering if this was a spontaneous bunch of protesters or some kind of group of Republican operatives trying to steal an election for their team, here's a picture I think can really answer that question.
Tom Pyle, Texas GOP official, Gary Malfus, GOP chief counsel, Rory Cooper, GOP congressional committee, Kevin Smith, GOP analyst, Steve Brody, GOP aide from Tennessee, Matt Schlapp, Mr. Rapist himself, okay? Mr. Sexual Favors himself, Matt Schlapp, Bush campaign staff at the time, Roger Moore's GOP aide, Dwayne Gibson, aide from Chuck Royal, GOP, Lena McConkey, GOP's, I guess, assistant, is that?
No recount means no change in votes from Miami-Dade. But surely the Palm Beach County votes could go Gore's way, right? Yeah, they could have, if they had finished the recount. But since Katherine Harris was Secretary of State, she was able to move the Palm Beach County deadline up a day to the Sunday after Thanksgiving.
So the Secretary of State has apparently decided to shut us down with approximately 2 hours perhaps left to go. And that's how she chose to exercise her discretion. We believe there are approximately 800 to 1,000 ballots left to count. So unfortunately, at this time, we have no other choice but then to shut down. The supervisor for elections needs to...
I present to you Trump's legal argument. That's pretty... Seems like, seems like history just does not change.
hurriedly gather all the paperwork and prepare to file the returns that we have. We certainly don't want to get anything in there at 5:01.
Palm Beach submitted a partial recount, and Katherine Harris gave him the old 2 for flinching and rejected it for being incomplete. Once again, Al Gore would get none of the newly counted votes, and it looked like this whole refusing to count votes in a Democratic election was a real winning strategy for...
Just so you guys understand, Secretary of State of Florida from 1999 to 2002, and then after this, because people were asking, like, what happened? Like, did she go to jail for this? Yeah, dude. She so did not go to jail that then she moved on to become a elected member of the House of Representatives from Florida's 13th Congressional District from 2003 to 2007. So no, they did not throw her in jail. They rewarded her, and she became a United States Congresswoman.
Team Bush.
I hereby declare Governor George W. Bush the winner of Florida's 25 electoral votes for the President of the United States.
But not so fast, Jackson, because Team Gore knows how...
Yes, the recount was going to flip it to Gore, and she moved up the deadline while knowing they wouldn't be able to hit the deadline. So in doing so, she invalidated the recount entirely, handing Bush Florida with a margin of victory of 537 votes and thus the presidency. And for those of you who were too young to remember, despite the fact that George W. Bush is now seen as like a hero by liberal circles because liberals are disgusting in the way that they whitewash war criminals, George W. Bush's administration was significantly more consequential for American domestic policy and American foreign policy, i.e. the entire fucking globe's policy, than Donald Trump. This is why I will never agree with people who say Donald Trump is worse than George W. Bush. He was not. Okay? George W. Bush and America's policy post 9/11 was significantly more damaging and significantly more consequential than anything else. Okay? Yeah, you don't even get Trump without Bush, but you have to understand, George W. Bush's administration was perhaps the worst administration of all time.
How to play the hits. They filed yet another lawsuit, and the Florida Supreme Court decided that they weren't going to let a bunch of computers that looked like this and George Bush's 2 best friends decide who got to be president.
The court shall order a manual recount of all undervotes in any Florida county where such a recount has not yet occurred.
The Florida Supreme Court ordered a hand recount of the entire state because they weren't about to let Florida be the butt of everybody's jokes for the next 24 years. That's right, it's the Supreme Court of the United States. And under the flimsiest of legal pretext, they've decided to take Bush's case. Rather than let Florida complete a legally mandated hand recount of their own votes, the 5 Republican-appointed conservative justices closed ranks and voted 5-4 to stop the count and end the election, officially handing the presidency to the guy who both lost the popular vote and received fewer votes in the deciding state. 5-4, huh? So you do understand democracy. And as if to admit that they shouldn't have stepped in to subvert an election, the 5...
Yeah, good thing that the Supreme Court isn't like slammed in that direction. Oh, wait, the people that worked on this process literally are now in the Supreme Court themselves. Oh my God, it's 6-3 now. Oh my God! Supreme Court is about to have 3 Bush v. Gore alumni sitting on the bench. Judge Amy Coney Barrett, once confirmed, will be one of 3 Supreme Court justices who assisted the legal team of the then Texas Governor George W. Bush in the Florida ballot recount battle that came down to a single vote at the Supreme Court. Not only did they have a 5 Not only did they have a 5-4 majority at the time, and some of those fucking dipshits are still in the Supreme Court, including but not limited to Clarence Thomas, as you saw, they also literally put people who were directly working with the Bush campaign at the time to do this into the Supreme Court. Of course, December 12, 2000 decision cutting off Florida recounts tore apart justices in the nation, and the case hovers in the air today as America approaches the November 3rd presidential election. This was from all the way back in 2020. Other current justices benefited from the decision giving Bush the White House over Vice President Al Gore as they eventually became Bush appointees to the bench. Conversely, a pending judgeship for one of the current members was derailed by Bush v. Gore temporarily. Of the original 9 who decided the case 2 decades ago, only 2 remain, Clarence Thomas and Stephen Breyer. And they were on opposite sides. Following our descriptions of the judges' associations, anyway, the 3 who assisted Bush, Chief Justice John Roberts. Roberts flew to Florida in November 2000 to assist Bush's legal team. He helped prepare the lawyer who presented Bush's case to the Florida State Supreme Court and offered advice throughout. Roberts also faced a singular personal challenge during the 36-day ordeal that extended from November 7th election day to the court's late hour December 12th ruling. Then in private practice, Roberts was preparing to argue before the justices in a separate business case on November 29th, and within days in December, the baby boy he and his wife had planned to adopt was born. Justice Brett Kavanaugh. He was in private practice in 2000 and helped the Bush legal team. He wrote on a 2018 Senate questionnaire that his work related to the recounts in Volusia County, Florida. Amy Covid Barrett herself wrote on the questionnaire she submitted to the Senate on her Supreme Court confirmation review. One significant case on which I provided research and briefing assistance was Bush v. Gore. When you look at the situation presented to you, like in front of you, and you're like, why does shit seem worse every year? Understand that this machine has set forth decisions long before you were born that is marginally making shit worse every single day. This is the long con. Okay? That's it. Just like the Roe v. Wade decision. Endlessly consequential and unimaginably unpopular, the Roe v. Wade decision. Every single person that was appointed under the Trump administration lied and said that this was a super precedent, including but not limited to Amy Covid Barrett. Lied to the American public and lied to Congress. They said they would not overturn it. They said it was too popular. They said there was too much legal precedent to defend it. They said it was a super precedent. What did they do? Lo and behold, once they became Supreme Court justices, they overturned it. That decision did not happen overnight. The Federalist Society wanted to do this for almost 40 years. Okay? 40 fucking years ago. They were like, yeah, this is what we're going to do eventually. I need you to understand that.
Conservative majority Supreme Court ruled for possibly the first and only time that this decision was not precedent. It would only apply in this one case, so let's all just forget about the time a conservative Supreme Court stepped in and stopped an election that was actively counting votes and handed it to the Republican. And there have been some incredible think pieces written about this whole affair, but possibly the best quote comes from the dissenting opinion of Justice John Paul Stevens. Although we may never know with complete certainty the identity of the winner of this year's presidential election, the identity of the loser is perfectly clear. It is the nation's confidence in the judge as an impartial guardian of the rule of law. And that is how the U.S. presidency ended up in George Regular W. Bush's hands in the year 2000. Honestly, it's a pretty depressing story, and you might even be wondering why I decided to cover it. Well, here's the thing. It's a presidential election year once again.
It's really hard not to sound like a conspiracy theorist when we're dealing with moves that are 40 years in the making. I mean, this isn't like a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy in the legal term. Like, they're conspiring to do this. It's not a theory. It's just a reality. These are not things that we are suspecting happen. These are things that were openly being communicated for multiple decades, and we're watching it unfold in front of our eyes. It's like, it's just the reality.
I probably wish it wasn't.
And the reason why I'm going through this process and explaining to you step by step how it has happened in the past and trying to explain to you how worse things have gotten since then is because I want you to I want you to understand. I want you to have the tools to analyze what happens tomorrow potentially. Okay? That's it. This is a big part of what I do, contrary to what my naysayers might claim I do. This is my job. This is what I am tasked with doing, which is to explain to you historical context as to why certain things are slated to happen. Okay? That's the goal here. Hopefully, your takeaway is we must not repeat the mistakes of the past. That's the goal of giving you historical context.
And after hearing me smash through all the ways the 2000 election got absolutely borked by some little brothers and a bunch of the guys from that scene in Wolf of Wall Street, you might even find yourself thinking, what's the point in voting when these dudes can just come in and swipe an election? But here's how I see it. The biggest problem with the 2000 election was that it was too goddamn close. Sure, this kind of thing is exciting as hell.
Is this the dagger?
This is the election for the President of the United States. And when we're trying to finally double down on the biggest pieces of climate legislation ever, we don't want a buzzer beater. We want to win by 40. We want a blowout. We want to light the scoreboard up so hot it becomes self-aware like in the movie Space.
But you guys understand, like, why. I hope this helps you kind of come to terms with why I'm so critical of the Democratic Party's messaging on this stuff whenever they say dumbass shit like, we want a strong Republican Party. Okay? There is nothing that frustrates me more than watching the party that I'm supposed to be in favor of, supposed to be in support of, the party that is supposed to closely align with my values, maybe not with the entirety of it, but like still the party that is supposed to be the counterbalance against like the endless creep towards fascism, openly priming their base to normalizing this kind of shit. Because every single time you hear Nancy Pelosi say things like, we want a strong Republican Party, we want the Republican Party of the past, this is what they're pointing to. This is what the Republican Party of the past did. And the only reason why you say stuff like that is because you either forgot what the Republican Party of the past did, or because you want to effectively prime your base into, hoping and dreaming that there is a different Republican Party out there. Project 2025 doesn't end with defeating Trump. It ends with defeating the whole Republican Party. Exactly. Thank you. That is why my analysis on Project 2025, I've been talking about that for a fucking year plus at this point, has always been Project 2025 is not new. A lot of people focused on it, and it's been an effective way to campaign against the current Republican Party. But you have to understand, Project 2024 and 2026 is the same. Donald Trump was implementing Project 2025. How much do you blame the media for this mess? 2000, I blame them a lot, but even in this year, the media always takes the right-wing framing. It kills me. Yeah, it's never stopped. Medium rare OG, details matter. Bush v. Gore was decided 7-2, not 5-4. 5-4 was on the remedy. Another detail, the attempt was to count undervotes, but not overvotes. Medium rare OG is a Bush v. Gore truther, saying that, like, no, Bush definitely won regardless.
Space Jam. But I'm not out here trying to advocate for voting for the climate on vibes alone, baby. So we teamed up with our friends over at Evergreen Action to take a look at what the actual climate stakes of this election are and why you getting yourself registered to vote and then actually going to the polls is 100% worth your time.
All right. So the rest of that is about climate change policy, which, you know, I have I've talked about, but like I wanted to specifically cover the aspect. I wanted to specifically cover this aspect, okay? Due to such a lib, he is fantastic, okay? You guys are, go support our boy. He's amazing. Climate Town rules. You're so wrong for saying that. I love them. I think he's great. And I will not allow any shit talking to take place. Yeah, my bad, dude. He cares about fucking, he cares about hoping. He cares about trying to stop anthropogenic climate change. But I know, what a fucking lame ass, dude. You're really fucked up. He does not want the next generation to just like die out the fucking womb. It's really fucking lame of him. Anyway.
To our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, in Pennsylvania with the latest on the Harris campaign. Good morning to you, Mary.
Bro, I don't know if you are Brandon Buckingham. I don't know why the fuck you keep repeating this over and over again. I know this is unrelated, but Brandon Buckingham made a great documentary about the life in southern Lebanon that's being suppressed by the algorithm. Please react to it if you haven't already. Try to bring more attention to the situation. What I don't understand about this is that, like, wasn't that guy fucking chirping about how much of a terrorist I am. Like, the election is tomorrow. I'm kind of surprised that guy literally was like crying about how he's an edgy boy who literally loves Sam Hyde, who is a fucking pedophile Nazi. Okay. But simultaneously, he has been extremely critical of my coverage, over Israel-Palestine, which I've always been truly shocked by. Okay. But also, he is, I guess now, I don't know. Didn't he try to chirp at you in person? Yeah, he did. I'm glad that he has arrived at, I guess, a normal position that, like, Lebanese population is worthy of dignity, and he recognizes their humanity, you know? Red tomato pig with him, yeah.
Good morning, Robin. Well, Kamala Harris is finishing out this
Harris making a final pitch to Michigan voters ahead of the election. Let's take a look.
Campaign crisscrossing this all-important state. She's hoping to turn out every last voter by convincing them that she's the candidate who can turn the page. Overnight, Vice President Kamala Harris making her final pitch to voters in Michigan.
Michigan, I am here to ask for your vote. I am here to ask for your vote.
Eager to end on a positive note, Harris not mentioning her opponent by name, opting to focus less on Donald Trump and more on the kind of president she would be, drawing a sharp contrast.
I pledge to listen to those who will be impacted by the decisions I make. I pledge to listen to experts, and I pledge to listen to people who disagree with me. Because, you see, I don't believe people who disagree with me are the enemy. In fact, I'll give them a seat at the table because that's what strong leaders do.
But in a state with one of the largest Arab and Muslim populations, Harris well aware the war in the Middle East is a crucial issue. In East Lansing, opening her remarks with a pledge to end the conflict and suffering.
This year has been difficult, given the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, and given the civilian casualties and displacement in Lebanon. It is devastating. And as president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza, to bring home the hostages, end the suffering in Gaza, ensure.
This should have been her starting point and her first message right out the fucking gate, and she inevitably expanded upon this. I'm going to talk about this. I covered this briefly yesterday, and I actually posted about it as well, even though I got fucking context noted by the dumbest individuals of all time. I said, unbelievable. This Palestinian Lebanese victim-centered rhetoric only came after Trump courted Arab voters in Dearborn. For months, we have been screaming that a change in Israel policy / rhetoric is the morally correct and politically sound decision. Now it's likely too late. And a lot of people, I guess, chose not to understand what I was saying, especially because this is the first time that she actually talked about the humanity of Palestinians and the Lebanese from the perspective of them being victims to Israel's actions, and without framing the context around October 7, Hamas, or Israel. She still maintained the position that Israel has a right to defend itself, but that came after. Words and the emphasis that you place on words matter, okay? Especially for someone like Kamala Harris. Now, what is really frustrating about this is that not only did I mention this, but this is the message that she should have come out with already from the jump, not the shit that she did for the past couple of months. And yet, this, in spite of the reality that this was the first time that she said Lebanese and Palestinian people are people and yada, 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 like a victim-centered narrative, a lot of people were like, she's been saying this. You're so fucking dumb. She's been saying this literally the entire time. You're just really dumb. To which I responded, I hate how incredibly stupid most people have become on this website. Politicians know the weight and placement of the words they use. This is the first time she started the convo centering Palestinians and Lebanese people instead of Israel's right to defend itself, October 7, or Hamas. That was my position. And yet, so many people just refused to comprehend what I was saying in this circumstance. And it doesn't fucking matter. Now, ultimately, I mean, she said the same thing weeks ago, verbatim. Once again, people are choosing not to understand what the difference here is. Now, even the likes of Craig Harrington, who I like, who is a research director at Media Matters for America, disagreed with me and said, this is from Kamala Harris's DNC acceptance speech. I don't know why these people think that I wasn't paying close attention to the things that she was saying. Okay? Of course I know exactly what the fuck she was saying. From Kamala Harris's DNC acceptance speech, I said, this is one of the first times she's opened the conversation without speaking of Israel's right to defend itself, or October 7th, first, centering the victims of Israeli violence in the beginning. We all understand word placement is deliberate, right? You are seeing what you want to see. Her statement was about the Arab American community in Michigan specifically. She's been saying this about the situation in Gaza for months, and people have been pretending that she's not been saying it. No, I am saying that this is still too little, but it's also too late. And not only that, but this is the first time, and this speech itself also obviously showcases the reality that she is not immediately coming out of the gate with October 7, Hamas, mass rapes, babies being lit on fire, to contextualize all of the violence that Israel committed in the aftermath of that. So obviously the campaign itself has recognized that there is a difference in messaging. It's just that it's far too fucking late for the campaign to recognize it, and yet liberals still refuse to even point out a marked tonal shift. Okay, and it's very frustrating that even like-minded individuals, even like intelligent liberals, alongside the rest of the fucking Twitter population, have completely lost their damn minds. Okay? I don't know why people are openly being confidently wrong on this issue. This shit PMO, the community note, is so garbage. Even the motherfucker says she already said this verbatim, posted a screenshot where she's still centering Israel's right to defend itself. Exactly. Now, you might say, and I actually would agree with this, that even this in and of itself is not enough. Of course it's not enough. Okay? But this should have come first and foremost. This should have come months ago. And then she should have expanded upon that to communicate a separation from the Biden White House. And she didn't do that. But the very fact that she is choosing to do it now, the very fact that she's even marginally changing her communication strategy on this now, 2 days before the election, is shocking. Why don't you block those freaks in your replies? I mean, I would have to block virtually every single person. It's like, I don't have enough fucking time to do that. I also have done that by just simply not going on Twitter when I am not live. I'm more so talking about how frustrating it is to have this fucking conversation with people who refuse to understand the point deliberately. Like, you have to be voluntarily refusing to hear my point in this situation, right? You are seeing what you want to see. Her statement about the Arab American community in Michigan specifically, she has been saying this about the situation in Gaza for months. She hasn't changed her message, bro. What are you hearing? She's saying the exact same thing using different words and is lying. I know. I understand that she is still not interested in actually changing her policy. That's not the point. The point is, this is not only bare minimum, but even the marginal difference in the way that she is communicating this issue came far too late. It's too little and it's too late. Democrats, especially, unlike the Republican Party, care about this stuff. They care about the optics of this stuff. Okay? That's why I expanded on it and said that this is the first time that she is not centering Israel around the conversation. Okay? There is a limited amount of space that I have to talk about these issues on Twitter, but it opens it up to people being voluntarily delusional. Okay? Anyway. You need to make sure you're strategic with your messaging on sensitive topics such as this, like Gaza, Lebanon being genocide. That can't be said in the marketplace of ideas, but then the Dems will run up the top of the hour ad break and elect Trump themselves. Okay, we're not doing top of the hour ad break debates, at least for the duration of the election, but thank you for debating me. You can avoid the no ads by subscribing, even though I'm not running ads, for $6 or for free, and you can support the stream by subscribing. Anyway, Great Filter event is tomorrow, so pog. Yes, I did cover the Epstein tapes yesterday. Isn't Swan Marcus a libertarian that lived in Thailand? I don't know. I don't care. People are so fucking stupid. And I like that there's enough members in this community that are hate watching currently that this dude's response went from 5.3K likes to 6K likes instantly. Like, welcome to the broadcast, chatters who are in here watching, hoping that they can have something that they can clip out of context and keep crying because they have no interest in the election, nor what happens in Israel, nor what happens in Gaza, and are specifically just here because of their hyperfixation. Anyway, Benign Burger, thank you for the 20 gifted subs. So, if it matters, your first tweet I didn't understand, it was like, she has said these things. Your replies clear it up, saying you meant things without the Israel part. Yeah. You got hate fans, Lamau. I know. They are so incredibly fucking invested. It's like kind of sad, but I mean, I don't know. I guess it is what it is. Someone said you support Grape. Okay, dude. I'm going to fucking ether you out. Like, if you're dumb enough that you're voluntarily fucking bringing, like, very deliberately shit that's clipped out of context, like, you need to be nuked from orbit, okay? Yes, dude. People say unhinged shit. They call me anti-Semite. They call me transphobic. Who the fuck cares? What can I do? There's nothing I can do about it. My haters are unimaginably invested. You are voluntarily doing their bidding when you fucking promote these idiotic fucking takes. Anyway, let's get back to Kamala Harris.
Israel is secure and ensure the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination.
The vice president crisscrossing the key battleground state on her last weekend of campaigning, hoping to get out the vote and reach key constituencies like black voters, with stops at churches.
But joy cometh in the morning, and church morning is on its way.
And black-owned businesses.
This is a fight that is not against something as much as it is for something.
Right.
In the final sprint, both campaigns trying to broaden their reach, playing ads during NFL games, speaking directly to voters.
Just remember, Kamala and her friends broke it. I'll fix it. Most important election in the history of our country.
He just looks like shit. God damn.
Go and vote.
Now, the baton is in our hands. I pledge to seek common sense solutions to make your life better. And I pledge to be a president for all Americans.
Harris taking a moment to cast her own ballot, too, by mail.
Make sure you fill out your ballot. I did mine. I'm going to put it in the mail.
And making a surprise appearance on Saturday Night Live, playing the mirror image of actress Maya Rudolph's version of her.
Because what do we always say? Keep Kamala and carry on, Allah.
Kamala Harris is spending the entire last day of this campaign here in Pennsylvania, the state most likely to tip this race. And she has several events throughout the day, and then it culminates in what is expected to be a massive rally here. And guys, she is leaning on some big names like Katy Perry, Oprah, Lady Gaga, Ricky Martin, The Roots, and others to help get her across the finish line.
Okay, Mary, thanks.
Vice President Kamala Harris will be.
I think that one of the things that Kamala Harris should have done, like an easy gimme, was to send Bernie Sanders and Tim Walz to Joe Rogan. Instead, they sent fucking John Fetterman, which is, you know, the absolute worst person I can think of to go on a 3-hour broadcast where you have to speak for 3 hours straight. But, you know, what the fuck do I know? Every single thing that I have said since the DNC in terms of like what kind of messaging she should lean in and what kind of messaging looks bad. Blueprint, which is a Democratic Party pollster that looks at messaging resilience, okay, has confirmed over and over again. I said from the jump, expanding Medicare, good. Top marks on Blueprint. Expanding price gouging, good. Top marks on Blueprint. I love small businesses. I'm going to do tax cuts for small businesses. Bad. Lowest marks you can possibly get on Blueprint. Okay? A Democratic Party pollster that analyzes the strategies, the communication strategies of certain statements. Okay? Horrible mistakes in terms of like rushing towards Brandon and saying that you are just like Brandon. that you are not going to be different than Joseph Robinette Brandon at all. Horrible, horrible fucking message. Really, really bad marks on Blueprint. The chair of the BOC, I was invited again to meet with Kamala Harris as she arrived in North Carolina last week. Every opportunity with her, I've used my time to advocate for Gaza and the West Bank. This time I was surprised, rambling, thread of my throats, processing. I've been asked why I continue to meet with Kamala Harris, and honestly, it's difficult deciding. I go back and forth every time I'm invited to meet her. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. This first time this year, back in February, I was chastised by other political leaders in Durham for wearing a keffiyeh when meeting her. I was told I was causing trouble. That experience, though uncomfortable and stressful, showed me that my presence in these spaces isn't just to have a conversation with the VP. It is also to educate and inform other leaders around me that Gaza is an issue that matters. I do, in certain instances, whenever I talk to like actual DC people, like people that work either directly when I talk to politicians themselves or people that work in their immediate orbit, I'm genuinely shocked at how much of the overarching attitude within DC comes from them being kind of out of touch with different narratives, different realities, and different messages that are resilient. Their only access to this sort of stuff comes from polls, okay? They are only informed after the fact. And even then, they just still, I think, have a lot of older people that are ideologically committed to a certain kind of framework. They're ideologically committed to third way neoliberalism. They're ideologically committed to tacking right. And so they refuse, like the older analysts, the older staffers, and the people who make these communication decisions, I think, refuse to reckon with even the focus tested messages. And obviously the focus groups and the focus tested messages can almost always fucking refuse to look at certain realities. Like that's the reason why you don't hear a lot of like messaging on Gaza, for example, with the exception of like other outside polling, like CARE doing a poll on Muslim voters in America or things of that nature, right? Polls don't make you send the cops on students. Ideology does. I mean, I think so, but I am shocked at how much of this is not like nefarious and cynical, even though there is a good bit of that nefarious and cynical hard-headedness. So much of that is just specifically because they just don't talk to a person that has a different perspective and their opinions calcify in the bubble that they're in. I think that's what it is. Oh my God, everyone is saying talk to her. What the fuck is happening? Holy shit, this chat is so brain rotted. There are more Jews than Muslims, and Dems think all of us are concerned more about Israel. I know, it's wrong. There's also no evidence to show that. There's only evidence to show the exact opposite. Like, it's not like there aren't polls on the matter. American Jews have said Israel is their 9th priority out of the top 10 priorities. They are American. They vote as Americans. They are not Israeli, and they are not voting on behalf of Israel. That is the weird reality that a lot of people don't recognize. Okay? It's almost funny when you think about it, when it's like they're doing woke dual loyalty narratives. You know? They're doing dual loyalty narratives, but woke. It's fucking so frustrating. Working with a former congressperson has always shocked me how much they just blindly believe what lobbyists tell them with little skepticism. Yeah. Anyway, a brief summary of how the interactions have gone when I bring up Palestine to her. February, boiler response that she heard me and appreciated my voice. August, thanked me for my leadership, said we have more work to do. But like I started, this time I was surprised. She immediately remembered me and baby Abdul and took him in her arms. When I started to speak with her, she really zoned in, more than she has in the past. I told her Gaza must be saved. I also shared with her that Aisha and was Tawkir's close friend and wife. She and her family deserve justice and haven't received that. She held my hand and looked me in the eyes. I promise you this will be my top priority. I promise you. I know words can be empty. I know she's VP right now. So why did I still vote for her? Because whether you agree with me, she's the only one who can bring an end to the war as president. Okay. How to tell a friend to vote for Jill Stein is not the biggest brain idea. I don't know where to even start this subject. Okay. I have never been a pro Jill Steiner. I do not like Jill Stein. I do not like the Green Party. Many people know this already. I've talked about it quite extensively. I'm, I understand why people do protest votes, but if you think that you're going to teach the Democratic Party a lesson, let me tell you, you're not. You know, do whatever you want to do. Could start by saying her VP is transphobic and pro-abortion limits. Yeah, I don't even know enough about like Butch Ware, but I just don't. I am sorry. I cannot trust a party that only remembers that they exist every fucking 4 years. Okay? Like, you can complain and say I'm in the pocket of the Democrats all day, every day. I think it's fucking ridiculous. Okay? Adam Conover made a video about it and made everybody mad, lol.
The problem with third parties. We all want more choices in our political system. I do too. But unfortunately, in the US, we have a winner-take-all political system. In other countries where they have proportional representation, if a third or minor party gets just 5% of the vote, then they get 5% of the seats in the legislature, so they get real power. But in a winner-take-all system, they don't get power. Instead, they just take votes away from the party that they're more closely aligned with and often throw the election to the party they're most opposed to.
The only aspect of this that I don't agree with is that it is up to the Democratic Party to win those votes. Okay? I'm not someone who's going to be like, unless you're voting directly for Trump, unless you're voting directly for the Republican Party in any capacity, I am of the mindset that, and even then, like, it's up to the Democratic Party to win those votes back. Okay? But I will stop you and tell you not to do that. I will urge you not to do that if you're like, oh, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. Having said that, however, my mindset on this, I think, is, I guess, quite controversial in American politics for some weird reason. But I believe that the entire purpose of voting is so that you can extract concessions from the party that you are voting for. That is the underlying basis of democracy. The notion that like these votes are being taken for granted is a silly one. I don't agree with it, and I don't think it's a successful method anyway. Why would you urge me not to vote for Trump? I'm curious, and I have always an open mind. Where do I begin? Donald Trump has greatly accelerated the income and wealth disparity in this country. It's something that I actually think is unconscionable and is one of the major problems that Americans are facing. He did this by offering permanent tax cuts to the top tax bracket, myself included, and also corporations. He also offered minor tax cuts to the working class Americans in an effort to justify the major tax cuts that the corporations of the wealthy were getting at a time when record high profits were happening for them regardless. He did not have to do that, but he did it regardless, and that was his signature legislative accomplishment. Donald Trump also undermined every single federal regulatory agency by directly appointing people who were tasked with destroying said agencies their entire fucking lives. Donald Trump is also unimaginably white nativist in his immigrant agenda, in his rhetoric towards migrants. He's dehumanized migrants actively and deliberately. I find that to be completely unconscionable. He is Hitlerian in his policies, in his advocacy, and also sometimes directly paraphrases Adolf Hitler, like when he said immigrants are poisoning the blood of this nation, or when he said or I guess people in his campaign had said that America should be for Americans at the Madison Square Garden rally, only less than 100 years after the Nazi rally that had taken place in Madison Square Garden, where they channeled similar sentiment. Donald Trump has also, promoted Hitlerian generals, said that he wanted Adolf Hitler's generals, or because he doesn't really understand the history itself, doesn't realize that Hitler's own generals tried to have him assassinated numerous times, but that's besides the point. The fact that he still wants that is fucking ridiculous. Donald Trump does not give a single shit about anyone. He only cares about himself, and he only cares about people who are exactly like him, extremely wealthy. His mass deportation policy will be devastating, is akin to Nazi Germany. Hitler also originally wanted to deport everyone and not, he didn't arrive at the final solution immediately. He originally wanted to do the Madagascar plan for the Jews, which he wanted to just deport them, right? But after years and years of dehumanizing rhetoric and recognizing that the financial calculation benefited just simply killing everyone rather than deporting them. That's how the Holocaust happened. Donald Trump's foreign policy track record is also devastating, with some exceptions. I would say that on North Korea, he was better than the Democratic Party. He was less militant and wanted North Korea and South Korea to come to terms on their own, which I thought was decent. But beyond that, it was, horrifying. Donald Trump threw aside Barack Obama's signature foreign policy accomplishment, the Iran denuclearization agreement. Iran said that they would still follow the Iran denuclearization agreement, which wasn't just simply kept up by the United States of America, but also numerous European partners. Our European partners were still going to the nuclear facilities even after Donald Trump said he was casting aside the Iran denuclearization agreement, and said that Iran was still following the process, because they thought America was not insane enough to do such a thing. Donald Trump responded to that by adding additional sanctions on Iran. Donald Trump also set the stage for October 7 by moving the American embassy to Jerusalem and solidifying Israel's occupation of East Jerusalem. Donald Trump also gave Golan Heights, which is annexed and occupied Syrian territory, to Israel. Donald Trump also did the Abraham Accords, which completely sidestepped Palestinians and wrote out Palestinian emancipation from the equation by simply putting forward on paper the already normalized relations between these Gulf states and MENA states that are American client states for the most part with Israel. And that was obviously endlessly frustrating. Donald Trump's Supreme Court appointments obviously did Roe v. Wade after lying to the American public, saying that they were not going to ever overturn Roe v. Wade because it was a super precedent. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot. Donald Trump's climate change policies were so unimaginably bad that even American industry leaders had to say, we can't have this level of carbon emissions. It's actually going to destabilize the planet. Thanks for some insights and actually explaining some things. I figured I'd get dehumanized for asking this question. Wait, what? Why? You said you have an open mind. Why would I dehumanize you? What the fuck? Donald Trump's far-right Supreme Court has overturned the Chevron deference, greatly reducing the power of the federal regulatory agencies. There are a million different things that the Trump administration did. Donald Trump's overall attitudes about, I think, dangerous misinformation spreading is genuinely terrifying for the future of this country. He has greatly destabilized this nation. Even on the rhetorical front, Donald Trump has also defended Nazis marching through the streets, where he very famously once said after the Charlottesville Nazi rally that there were very fine people on both sides. There were no fine people on one side of the equation. The Nazis did not have very fine people on their ranks. That was ridiculous. Donald Trump has wined and dined direct neo-Nazis like Nicholas Fuentes, just like everyone's favorite debate lord, Destiny himself. Donald Trump has openly kept neo-Nazis with direct ties to former Nazi groups like Sebastian Gorka in his cabinet, in his administration. Yeah, just a bad guy overall. Donald Trump utilized the marshals to assassinate someone who had killed a neo-Nazi in Portland, and then openly fantasized and openly took credit for the assassination. What else? Why is this race so close, given what you just said about Trump's failings? I mean, so much. Yeah, that's another one. That's a really good one, actually, that I keep forgetting to mention. There were a shit ton of domestic white supremacist, white nationalist acts of terror under the Trump administration due to the fact that Donald Trump was utilizing the bully pulpit to justify and sometimes beef up and give confidence to these neo-Nazis, so much so that they demonstrated openly in Charlottesville in the Unite the Right rally, where they didn't even fear political repercussions. So much so that they fucking unmasked themselves deliberately. Donald Trump greatly accelerated drone strikes, even though he claimed to be a peaceful dove. On the domestic agenda, Donald Trump really revitalized the American Nazi movement that had remained nascent for quite some time. Gave them the confidence to basically operate in broad daylight, especially because Donald Trump's policies were so closely aligned with the neo-Nazi movement in the United States of America. So there's a lot of stuff that he did. I mean, his misinformation during COVID was pretty damaging. Probably killed a shit ton of his own supporters, honestly. And this is before we even get to January 6th. I mean, I do consider January 6th to be a very funny moment in American history, but like, if they were better organized, for example, that would not have been so funny. Luckily, it was all, diabetic HVAC business owners that were trying to climb over the fucking wall of the Capitol, and it didn't really go anywhere, but that doesn't change the reality that he still attempted to overturn the democratic results of an election that he lost. That was fucking insane. He also had a false elector ballot swap initiative that he was also working on the side. Things that he is supposed to be, in court over, in federal court over, which of course, they pushed that back. Part of the reason why they were able to push that back is because Donald Trump's own Supreme Court, with its 6-3 right-wing majority, decided that the president actually has presidential immunity over presidential acts, which created an unnecessary additional hurdle, an unnecessary legal hurdle that must be cleared if you are going to prosecute a fucking former president. This in and of itself is really fucking silly, because the determination of whether something constitutes a presidential act or one that was conducted as a civilian with the interest as like a private American citizen is also left up to the Supreme Court. They did that specifically so they could push back the federal prosecution beyond the election. Anyway, I already mentioned the Abraham Accords. He also flirted with Putin. Yeah, that stuff is neither here nor there. That's like he's done so much awful shit. Like, I don't think personally Donald Trump is anti-NATO in the way that he presented himself. I think that stuff is like, that stuff is silly. If he was so incredibly anti-NATO, then I don't think that the Biden administration would have continued some of the demands that he implemented, as far as like demanding that our NATO partners put more in to their own defenses, for example. Donald Trump never actually pulled out of Afghanistan despite claiming to be a peaceful dove. He actually secured an Afghan withdrawal agreement, sidestepping the puppet administration of the Afghan government and directly speaking to the Taliban leadership, which he released out of prison, by the way, which wouldn't necessarily be a problem if he had continued along the Afghan withdrawal, which he never actually demonstrated political courage to do. Joe Biden actually did demonstrate political courage and withdrew out of Afghanistan. And then Donald Trump used that withdrawal to fucking attack him over and over again. Yeah. Assassinating a foreign general, Qasem Soleimani, on foreign soil in Iraq was also obviously a major escalation against Iran. Very dangerous escalation, if I might add. But that's neither here nor there. I feel like the Biden administration letting Israel loose upon the entire region has been an even more dangerous escalation. What policies would you say Donald Trump has done that hurt largely the economy enough for someone who's in your tax bracket would make them second guess Trump's ability to make the economy more prosperous? I don't think I'm in agreement with other people in my tax bracket, first and foremost. Let me just say. Secondly, there is a reason why there are a lot of very wealthy Americans who are terrified of a Trump administration, and that is volatility. Okay? Donald Trump is an uncontrollable demon. Okay? He is so self-interested and he's so malleable in many respects that he can do anything and everything at any moment. This creates volatility. Volatility, to a certain degree, can be beneficial for wealthy people, but volatility beyond a certain level creates instability, which is not good for profits overall. Okay? Oh my God, he was already president? Yes, he was. And shit was not good. What do you mean? I think the only reason why people say, oh my God, he was already president, shut the fuck up, is because you just forgot what it was like when he was president, which is part of the reason why I say the Kamala Harris campaign actually fucked up on the communication front, on that front as well. Kamala Harris could have reminded people how shitty it was, what it was like when Trump was president, what it was like when so many of your immediate family members just had their fucking brains broken, lost, basically dead at this point. Some of them literally did die due to COVID. Anyway, people have a lot of short memories. But how can you blame Trump for COVID? I'm not blaming Trump for COVID existing. I'm blaming Trump for not taking adequate countermeasures and routinely spreading misinformation about how to deal with COVID in directly at odds with the professionals that he had hired in his administration to deal with it. I've noticed there's a pretty distinct difference between people who remember vividly the feeling of election night 2016 and the following 4 years and those who don't remember that at all. It's understandable. I think we have short-term memory, and it's made especially worse by the social media cycle that just like hypes things up for 24-hour time frames, and then you forget about it immediately.
Even if they don't intend to, they functionally act as a spoiler. And you can see that in our political system because the GOP has literally tried to help Jill Stein and the Green Party get on the ballot and get them more votes. Now, there are third parties that escape this trap. The Working Families Party is incredibly effective because they run fusion candidates with Democrats they support to pull them to the left, and they organize year-round to build power for working people. But unfortunately, most third parties in America don't do that. Instead, they just run one candidate every 4 years, bank a lot of donations, get a lot of votes, get a lot of press, but the functional effect of doing so is to give power to the party and policies they oppose the most. And as much as we wish it to be otherwise, that is simply not an effective political strategy until we get ranked choice voting and
an interesting bit. I don't think they're trying to remind people how bad Trump's term would win. There have been psych studies that we are in a mass event where the wide population basically memory hold late 2020 through 2021. It's a really cool study at the moment, but people legit do not remember it en masse. So trying to remind them could just fail. No, I'm not talking about 2020 till 2021. I'm not talking about COVID. I do understand why people memory hold COVID. COVID was a traumatic global event that a lot of people do not remember or want to remember fondly. That part I understand. Okay, it's psychological trauma. No one wants to fucking remember it because it sucked. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about everything leading up to COVID. I'm talking about virtually everything leading up to COVID. That's why I like Charlottesville and like the misinformation, like the utilization of the bully pulpit. These are significant things. These are very significant things. Like, I think one reason why Joe Biden won over Donald Trump beyond COVID was also the fact that Americans were slammed to the television every single fucking day because Trump would do something insane every single fucking day. Okay? It's impossible to remember every single thing that he's done. Here, I'll give you an example. Many people in here are probably going to be shocked when they find out that Donald Trump early on in 2016 claimed that a Mexican-American judge could not preside over his case because he was of Mexican background. That is just pure racism. Okay? Pure fucking racism. That is not even a thing that people probably remember because there was a million other things that he has said. Okay? It like doesn't even fucking track with a gorillion different things that Donald Trump has said. That's what I'm talking about in terms of like what people should be reminded of. They should be reminded of how fucking shitty it was to like constantly have to, pay attention to what the fuck the president was saying.
National representation in America, which God willing we will have one day.
All right, let's continue. It's sort of low-key the third most important data point this week after Seltzer and New York Times Siena. Univision poll Latino voters, Harris 64%, Trump 30%. 69% said the Puerto Rico garbage remark was more racist than humorous. Remember, permissible racism, you go above that and people go, no, that's unacceptable. That's seemingly what was the straw that broke the camel's back. Okay? Donald Trump was doing fantastic outreach to Latino voters across the board, okay, all around the country. Texas GOP Latino outreach is like basically a national thing now. It's the national outreach strategy of the Republican Party. And it seemed like a lot of people, a lot of Latinos did not care about Donald Trump saying, like, we're going to fucking kill every undocumented migrant. We're going to deport them. We're going to deport millions of them, and it's going to be awesome. They didn't care about it because no one understands one, how this policy would be implemented and how violent that policy would be. And no one understands what the underlying sentiment is for why we must have that policy to begin with. It's white supremacy through and through. Okay. Latinos did not care about it across the board, at least in the way that they were being polled up until the fucking Tony Hinchcliffe pivotal moment. It is pretty funny that is like something that shook a lot of people into going, oh my God, wait a minute, these guys are actually racist. Because for many Americans across the board, regardless of their fucking background, they don't understand the violence that the policy that they're advocating for will cause. They don't understand how that will actually impact them personally. And the greatest example of this is abortion. Okay? The greatest example of this is fucking abortion. So many goddamn dumbass Republicans were like, yeah, no, it's actually, it's fantastic. Yeah, I don't care. I'm pro-life. I'm pro-life. I'm pro-life. It's probably fine that, Trump is pro-life. I like that, actually. And then Roe v. Wade was overturned, and they're like, oh my God, I never really thought that my daughter would need a fucking abortion due to a medical emergency, and now she might fucking die. Because people do not have the capacity to understand what the policies they're fucking voting for look like when it is in practice. Okay? That's it. A lot of Republican policy revolves around pure selfishness. And not only that, but it also revolves around like punishing perceived enemies. Okay? They don't realize that they might themselves be in the fucking crosshairs, like white women, not recognizing that like Roe v. Wade actually harms them and other people like them. Or, Hispanic voters that are like, yeah, no, I'm actually super fucking pro security at the border. Not realizing that undocumented migrants do not constitute a national security threat whatsoever. There is no evidence for this, okay? Correct me if I'm wrong, but every state where abortion is illegal, there's a life exception for abortion. Brother, there is no reason for abortion to be illegal. Every single state has now voted when given the opportunity to legalize abortion again. The fuck are you talking about? And women are still dying regardless of the life exception. Because when you add an unnecessary medical hurdle, an unnecessary legal hurdle to a routine medical process, doctors are understandably not going to follow through on this procedure because they're fucking worried about repercussions. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, a teenager just died last week in Texas. Like, what are we doing? So stupid. Yeah, I'm about to fucking die on my way to the emergency room. But hold up. Let me get a fucking approval from a Republican judge before that's allowed. A pregnant teenager died after after trying to get care in 3 visits to Texas emergency rooms. It took 3 ER visits in 20 hours before a hospital admitted Nevaeh Crane, 18, as her condition worsened. Doctors insisted on 2 ultrasounds to confirm fetal demise. She's one of at least 2 Texan women who died under the state's abortion ban. That's how it works. How the fuck is this still a question? Like, I don't understand. That's why any kind of legal limitation to abortion, because you've imagined that like women are carrying pregnancies the fucking 9 months, almost a term, specifically to get a fun abortion that is born out of the hallucinations of like the most psychotic individuals out there, legislating at the behest of like actual fascist hallucinations is insane. You are creating unnecessary hurdles. You're creating unnecessary legal hurdles in an instance that does not require any hurdles whatsoever. Anyway, even just based on the way that this chat discussed Tim Pool's opinions on dilution and extraction, dilution and curettage, curettage, it is so clear the lack of education is why we live with these outcomes. This community is at least supportive, even when ignorant. Now think about the fucking idiot hogs, and everyone makes fun of The Handmaid's Tale, but to be honest, that shit is bad. Bar for bar, the current plot in reality. Yes, curettage. This is not unwanted byproduct. This is the anticipated result. They want women who have sex outside of marriage to suffer. Yes, for some of the Christian nationalist legislators, that is precisely the point. But for many people who think that they're pro-life, or many people who are voting for pro-life candidates, they don't think about it like that. Do you understand? People are voting. By the way, this is also stupid because like a shit ton, I forget what percentage, but I think it's like the majority of women who get abortions are already mothers. Okay? The fuck? So that also doesn't make any sense. It's not like they're doing it out of wedlock. They're doing it out of necessity. Anyway, let's move back. Harris, Wallace, and campaign surrogates hit battleground states with a unity message for voters.
In Pennsylvania today, after a Sunday spent in Michigan visiting a church and a barbershop and urging young people to vote at Michigan State University. Nancy Cordes is in Detroit. Nancy, good morning.
Implying mothers are married Their marital status doesn't matter, dumbass. The fuck are you talking about? Like, oh my God. Not all mothers who are getting an abortion are married. What the fuck point does that make? What difference does that make, dude? Married or not married, it doesn't matter. The conversation is about women's bodily autonomy, a medical procedure that should be readily fucking available for all people unconditionally. The abortion restrictions are just as stupid as someone deciding that they don't like insulin, that diabetics should fucking die and that they shouldn't be able to get insulin because of decisions they made in their personal lives because they fucking, ate too many chocolates or whatever. That would be insane, except it's perfectly permissible and valid when Republicans make that exact same argument for abortion. You said wedlock. Okay, it doesn't matter. Married or not.
Good morning, Nate. Vice President Harris has been calling former President Trump out about his unfounded claims of voter fraud. She says he's signaling to voters that their votes won't count and urging her supporters not to fall for it. Her campaign is trying to strike a delicate balance right now, signaling optimism because that's contagious, but not so much that any of their voters.
Oh my God, come on. Type 1 diabetics need insulin. It's genetic. Type 2 is the one that's usually caused by being overweight. Okay, so what? Exactly. Just like almost all of the fucking abortions that are conducted are still happening in the first trimester, 80% plus, but it doesn't stop people from literally trying to shut that medical procedure off as well. Plenty of abortions are being done because of the direct, not just the viability of the fetus, but directly, like virtually almost every single, I think literally every single abortion that happens in the third trimester is done because of either the viability of the fetus or the life of the carrier. There is some kind of impact that is occurring to the carrier. That's why this process that is incredibly invasive is allowed, okay? Putting any sort of restrictions on third trimester abortions ultimately is just as stupid as saying, nah, I'm not going to do insulin. And then you trying to say, oh, I don't get it. Type 1 diabetics do need insulin, though, to survive. Also, type 2 diabetics need insulin to survive as well. It doesn't matter if it's being caused by being overweight. What kind of fucking stupid argument is this? You can't just be like, oh, I'm sorry, fat people deserve to die. That's not a position that you can say, especially in a country where 60% of the population is obese. Holy shit. The reason why I use diabetes is for that purpose. There's a lot of people who love fat shaming people and a lot of people who think that fat people deserve to fucking die. So that's why I use diabetics as a reason. Because dumbasses like you will eat the bait and immediately be like, well, type 2 diabetes is because people are fat. Okay, so should they die? What kind of fucking argument is this?
Get complacent a day before Election Day.
We have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it?
A confident-sounding Harris on the campaign trail Sunday.
How are you guys doing? How's your family?
Crisscrossing Michigan as her running mate hit North Carolina and Georgia.
If you want to get rid of the anxiety, go vote, go vote.
High-profile surrogates picked up the slack everywhere else.
Hello, Milwaukee!
Harris's closing message is about unity, collaboration, and freedom.
Including the fundamental freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do.
In these final hours, her campaign is counting on a ground game advantage.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your support.
They say their teams knocked on 3 million doors across the battleground states this weekend.
Hi there. My name is Kevin.
Kevin Young is a bus driver from Oregon, volunteering in Georgia.
If I had to guess, probably between 750 and 1,000 doors that I've knocked. And that doesn't count the ones, where people aren't home.
The race was rocked this weekend by a new Des Moines Register poll that has Harris leading in red state Iowa, thanks in part to a 35-point advantage among women over 65.
Insane.
The seniors at her rally in East Lansing, Michigan, were not surprised.
I think it's probably because they remember before Roe.
We grew up in a time when we had a right to choose, and now they just took it away from us. Yeah. What next right will they take?
Mr. Trump wants to go back. We don't need protection from him. We're perfectly capable human beings.
Some of those supporters you saw in line got there 12 hours before the Harris rally, a packed event inside the MSU Fieldhouse. In fact, all the rallies we've been to in these closing days have been filled to the rafters with supporters cheering for every line, especially anything she has to say about young voters, about health care, and of course, about reproductive rights. Tony.
Nancy, thank you very much.
One day, as you know, to go until the final votes, the candidates making their final pitch to the nation.
Robin, barnstorming through the battleground states over the weekend. Early voting across the country is coming to an end. Over 78 million Americans have already cast their ballots.
Final push for both candidates right now. Vice President Harris focusing on the must-win state of Pennsylvania. Former President Trump hitting 3 states in the final hours: North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Our team is in place across the battlegrounds with the campaigns. Rachel Scott starts us off with the latest on Donald Trump. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning. We are finally here. Just one more day to go. Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris delivering 2 vastly different closing arguments. Trump's advisors have spent months trying to get him to focus on the message, immigration, and the economy. But in the final days, the former president only leaning more into violent and dark rhetoric. Overnight, Donald Trump using the final moments of his 2024 campaign to air grievances and push false claims about the 2020 election, insisting he should have never left the White House after he lost.
I shouldn't have left. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, good luck. That would have been kind of sick, because I think that they would have had to forcibly extract him out of the White House. That would have been sick.
Because we did so well.
At that rally in all-important Pennsylvania, Trump suggesting he wouldn't mind if journalists covering his campaign were shot.
And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And get me, somebody would have to shoot through fake news. I don't mind that so much, because I don't mind.
His campaign telling us Trump was joking, but it's
what the fuck?
The second time just days ago saying this about Republican Liz Cheney, who has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9.
It's just a joking defense. Yeah, he was just joking, like
9 barrel shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington.
Trump. I don't know if you answered this already. How do we hold the Democrats accountable if we have to give them our vote? I have mentioned this time and time again. There is no way that you can punish the Democratic Party. They will not learn lessons. The only way that you can technically do this is by continuing to create outside pressure platforms, groups that actually hold material power, including but not limited to labor unions, for example. Okay? That is the only way that you can build up enough political capital that you can genuinely change the Democratic Party's attitude on a lot of these issues. That's it.
Trump's campaign downplayed those comments. The former president.
Yeah, also Democratic primaries for sure. For sure. President hitting 3 swing states in one day, going from complaining that President Biden is no longer in the race to calling Democrats demonic. Yeah, it's called organizing, or actually care about politics outside the presidential cycle. Exactly.
This is a group of people, large group of people, larger than people think, but it's a very demonic party. It's become that way. The people aren't. The people, Democrats, regular Democrats aren't. Most of them agree with what I'm saying.
And as he tries to win back Georgia, the former president campaigning with Herschel Walker, the Senate candidate who lost after it was revealed he allegedly paid a woman he had an affair with to have an abortion, something Walker has denied.
We fence shield. All made in the USA, wrapped around our country to defend ourselves and our country. It's all going to be made in the United States, and a lot of it in your great state. We'll put Herschel Walker in charge of that little sucker, okay?
In the final stretch, Trump also campaigning alongside Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Kennedy, who has pushed a range of conspiracy theories about vaccines, says Trump promised him he would be in charge of the public health agencies.
Just every aspect of this is so fucked. He's like, I'm going to do all of the bad things. Okay? I'm going to put the anti-medicine guy in charge of medicine. I'm going to put the guy who doesn't know where the fuck he is, who literally lost an election because he kept saying he was a cop when he wasn't a cop, with incredible CTE damage from a time when they used to have the pillowy fucking football helmets, in charge of missiles. I don't even know what the fuck what he means by that. It's just I don't even know who the fuck this is for, really. Good luck.
I want to be in the White House, and he's assured me that I'm going to have that.
Over the weekend, Kennedy saying that on day one, a Trump White House would advise all U.S. water systems to remove fluoride from public water. So the Trump campaign putting out another statement later saying that the former president received a range of policy ideas but remains focused on tomorrow's election. Today, Donald Trump heads to North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, guys.
Okay, Rachel, thanks very much.
Actually be dangerous just to bring them back to their countries. Their countries weren't accepting them back until I came. You know, with Barack Hussein Obama, I call him the Great Divider. He's the great.
Barack Hussein Obama. Remember, his middle name is Hussein.
Damn, this guy's good.